Howdy, y'all. It's Carrie's Raven. I hope y'all had a very good New Year's. My New Year's was great. Just spent some time with my family, cooked a little bit, and just relaxed, really. But I'm back, and we have some haunted building stories for you today. Number 1. With Halloween around the corner, I thought, what better time to share a few personal experiences on here. So here it goes. This incident goes a long way back to the early 90s. I was 16 years old then. Interestingly enough, it occurred in what seemed to be the most likely unlikely of places, in a church somewhere in Betaling, Jaya. I attended one of these teen church camps, which usually lasted for 3 days or so. There had been a couple of activities arranged leading up to the last day, where we all had different tasks assigned. Me, I was responsible for controlling the light switches and had a set of cues to follow for the night event. The catch was this. I was to do it from a small room behind the church, which housed the circuits. Unfortunately, it was only accessible from outside the church. In order to get to it, you had to exit the main church hall to the side and into a long, dark alleyway, dark at night that is, flanked by the church and another small building. A short staircase then led up to a small veranda outside the room. The small room had only one door, and the opposite wall had windows looking out into the church stage, so one can see what was happening. Anyway, to make a long story short, things didn't go as planned. You know how it is with the generation clashes. Some holler than thou prick in his mid-20s decided to take it upon himself to play with the switches in the main hall as he saw fit, without informing me. And people wonder why I have problems with authority figures. Little did they know, there was a very, very angry person in that room then. Me. And then it happened. A heavy kind of breathing. It didn't hit me at first. I attributed it to the speaker on stage having some breathing problems since his speech was pretty much amplified thanks to the amplifiers around the hall. It continued for a while, and when it didn't go away, I went to the window and pricked my ear to the nearest sound system in the room. Still, I couldn't figure out the source of the breathing. It was puzzling. Since the speech was really loud, I was getting really bothered by the breathing. I decided to exit the room to the small veranda outside. Halfway to the door, I got creeped out. Anyone knows that any time you move further away from a noise source, the noise starts to fade out. Not this breathing. It's stuck with the same decimal. And what's worse, this time it felt more like if someone was next to me breathing heavily into my ear. There was no one visible around. When the realization hit me that something was seriously out of place, I started to shake. Here was this heavy breathing next to me, and I had a million things bombarding my mind on what to do. My instinct, I mumbled a prayer, and it was only then that the heavy breathing stopped. A sense of relief overwhelmed me as I made my final steps to the door, out into the veranda. But it was too much. I practically broke down by the stairs. After what seemed like an eternity, I heard footsteps. I don't know, but I think someone heard me wailing. A couple of my friends came over to the back room and asked me what happened. I was in a pretty disturbed state then. They accompanied me off the place before I explained what happened. I found out that my supernatural experience was only one of several that other people have reported happened in the church. Explanation-wise, I got the typical satanic forces attacking the church. Me, I can only say it was not ordinary or normal, and certainly not a very pleasant experience. Anyways, years later, I befriended a clairvoyant. One topic led to another, and we started talking about my above past experience. She told me a vision came to her of an old man who was very angry. For what reason, she had no idea. Me, I just think maybe he wanted to share his anger with, well, another angry person around the corner. Like attracts like, doesn't it? Number 2, I am a CNA, which means that I assist nurses and do all the patient's diaper changes, take vitals, showers, baths, linen changes, bring them food, assist them in the bathroom, and of course, when they unfortunately pass away, I prepare the body to be seen by patients' family members or to be sent to a funeral home. Scratches on the window. One day I showed up to shift and we had a patient pass away right before shift change. So it became my job to go into the room to start cleaning up and getting the room and patient ready to be seen by family. The nurse I was working with was native, and she explained to me that in her culture, you open a window to let the spirit out to bring them peace. She then went over to the window and opened it up. We said a prayer, and in the middle of this prayer, we heard a scream from the room right next door. We ran over to the room with our middle-aged patient explaining to us she was scared. We asked why. She told us that there was scratches and bangs on the windows, like someone was trying to get inside. We were completely spooked, but explained to the woman everything was going to be okay. I brought her some snacks and coffee and comforted her before going back into the deceased patient's room to finish getting the body ready to be seen by family. The linen closet. I was really busy one day getting patients showered and bathed and changing sheets. I went to the linen closet to get more sheets to make a bed, which was a very small room. I am really used to people coming into the room to grab things while I'm already in there because we're all busy. So it didn't surprise me when someone came in to grab sheets. I was holding the door with my foot while grabbing sheets out of the linen closet, so I assumed that I was very much in the way of this person that was coming to get sheets as well. I felt this person's presence clear as day. I felt them so close that their breath was on my neck. I turned and said, "Oops, I'm sorry," and realized that no one was there. I was not spooked at all. This didn't feel like a negative spirit. The lady in the bathroom. We had a very sweet lady with a cardiac issue admitted to the floor, and she was independent, other than needing assistance with getting her IV pole into the bathroom with her. So I assisted her into the bathroom and shut the door to give her privacy, of course, then left the room and waited for her to call for assistance. She didn't call after about 10 minutes, so I went to go check on her to make sure she was doing okay. When I entered the room, I heard a yelp from the bathroom, so I ran and threw open the door. She was leaning over unconscious, so I hit the code blue from the room. She unfortunately ended up passing away from this event. The next day, the nurse I had worked with her and I were outside the room talking when we heard a woman scream from that room. We ran into the room and asked if the patient there was okay. They looked at us like we were crazy when we explained that we had heard a scream. We were completely spooked. A few days later, I was walking in the hall and heard a scream once again. I went running into that room and another nurse was already in the room when I got there. We had both responded to the scream, and we had realized that no one was there. We ended up calling a priest to bless the room. Having spiritual experiences in hospitals is not uncommon. I have worked in the healthcare field for quite a while in different locations, and I have had experiences everywhere I've worked. I feel a close connection to the people that pass away and to the people I care for. I pray every day that we can all have peace when we're through. Number 3. My mom has her own personal office at work. Her chair is right underneath the vent. For a while now, she's been hearing dripping noises coming from the vent. She asked her coworkers about it, and they all say they can't hear anything. A couple days ago, one of her coworkers went into her office to tell her that one of their members had passed away. She got up from her chair and walked over to her coworker. The second that he said he died, water started pouring down from the vent all over my mom's chair. The whole thing was soaked, and her coworker were in complete shock. Was this a paranormal experience or just coincidence? Number 4. When I was young, around 10 to 11, I was in my dad's classroom helping organize his students' computers and clean the classroom. I was putting computers back into a cart, walking back and forth for the same location. Perpendicular to the cart was a small library with a clipboard for checking out books, as well as a string tied to a pen by the clipboard for convenience. In front of the string and clipboard was a singular chair. On one of the walks away from the cart, I passed the chair and saw an apparition sitting in the chair. It was a stereotypical ghost girl, with long black hair covering her face and long white gown. The chair was completely empty, and once I turned back to look at her, she was gone, and the string behind the chair was swinging back and forth. I was smart and a rational kid, and to this day I believe my experience to be truthful, and I have heard many similar stories regarding a girl with long black hair and long white gown appearing a full-bodied apparition. Is the girl known as a certain type of entity? Has anyone else had similar experiences? I'm genuinely curious as to why I heard so many stories of this same experience. Number 5. I worked at a funeral home in South Florida for around 8 months. I've never had an anomalous experience involving apparitions, spirits, or anything of that nature. When I first started working there, my boss and other coworkers had told me of their paranormal experiences at the funeral home. One of my coworkers, a Brazilian woman in her 60s, had to sleep at the home one night during a tropical storm. She was woken up in the night by the sound of footsteps. I know it sounds a little cliche, but this is how she told the story. She was sleeping in the kitchen, where we had a television screen which displays the view from several cameras throughout the home. In one of the cameras, she could see a woman standing in the middle of the room by the entrance. Thinking someone had broken in, she ran to the entrance to find no one there. Also, the entire building has a security system, an alarm that would go off if anyone had opened the door or window. This story freaked me out, but it wasn't until the day we were cleaning up after a funeral for an elderly woman when things got weird. It was just me and the Brazilian coworker in the building at around 8 p.m. As we were cleaning the chapel where the decedent's casket was, we both heard a woman humming and speaking. It was a deep ambient sound, almost like it came from right above our heads. I felt it all throughout my body and freaked out, to say the least. I worked here for another few months, ended up leaving because the pay was dismal, and found another job. I'd work there again, and I found the situation intriguing, but scary as heck. Number 6. I used to work at a hotel as a receptionist. It's a 3-star hotel, and I worked from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. since I literally had nothing to do besides wait for people. I used to bring my laptop and watch the movies on mute. One day I didn't bring my laptop and I was so bored, so I started scrolling on Instagram. I just wanted to mention that I never ever searched or looked at paranormal stuff back then. Then I found a post that said, "Did you know? Ghosts will try to communicate with you with strong odors or smells like cologne or burning." While reading this, it started smelling like the whole town was on fire. Fucking went out in the road with a big ass flashlight. I had to check the beach if anyone would be at the beach at night, and if I did, I'd kick them out. And nothing. No sight of a fire or anything. Went back to the reception table, went to the back door to get some air. The back door led to the back side of the hotel and had rooms. Once I went outside, to my left there was a big, big house with sheets and clothes hanging on the roof. I saw a lady going out to the roof. She literally smelt the air and went back in. and once she went back in a minute or two later, the smell stopped. Checked my phone, and the post was still there. Nothing on the news about a fire or anything in the morning. Weirdest experience ever working at night. Number 7. So basically, the story starts out when I was a kid. Multiple times I have seen what I assumed to be ghosts. Once at a theme park, I saw one on the wave pool, the very top of the wall on the far side. I also saw one at my middle school when I was racing my friend down the hall. I had looked over and seen a man who looked like he was in his teens, wearing similar clothes to the era of the Industrial Revolution. Another time, I had seen one on the bridge over the river near my house, and it looked like he was about to jump off. The weird thing about the encounter is that the entire car went quiet when I had seen them. Nobody had said anything, but I had clearly seen him, and there were about 6 kids and 2 adults in the car, so it was very odd that it had just went suddenly quiet. Now that I am older and I have encountered a few spirits, but more recently I have encountered ones that seem darker in nature. The first I encountered in my old apartment I lived in about a year and a half ago. I had one of the sleep paralysis dreams. I don't really ever have nightmares, and if I do, they are very few and far between. But this night I had a dream of some sort of entity walking down the stairs behind my closet door. There were no actual stairs behind my closet door, but in my dream there was. I was trying to open my eyes, but I was frozen. Just as the entity opened the door, I woke up. It had me shaken so much that I could not go back to sleep. Someone in the trailer park I had lived in died a couple months previous and was left there for about a month until someone did a welfare check. It is a mobile home, an old one from the 70s. It had been here a long time with many different owners. We moved in. One thing that I dislike about the place is that the closets have mirror doors. But because I'm renting, if I can't do anything about them, when we first moved in, I had felt a little weird about the place, so I blessed my bedroom in a prayer over it. Not long after that, we started hearing weird noises. I have a daughter who is young and was about 5 months at the time. We heard her crying and went to go check up on her, but she'd been fast asleep. Other times we'd hear moans like a woman was crying in the same area. My daughter's room is on the other side of the house. We've heard knocking on the windows and all sorts of things. It has seemed to go away, though only once in a while I'll hear a weird noise or hear a baby cry and my daughter will be fast asleep. Just wondering if anyone else has any thoughts on this. Should I record my happenings? I do have a video camera that I could set up. Update. So, I guess the ghosts don't like to be talked about. They hate gossip because today they came back all more aggressive than before. I heard my own voice this morning, and then a few minutes, another baby cry, 100% not my daughter's, as stated in the comment. She was right in front of me. They went silent for a bit until my boyfriend came home. Then we heard maiming again, which was followed a few minutes later by knocking. Sounded like my daughter's bedroom, where most of the activity comes from. I'm going to make another part so I can share the video, because I don't think I can do it on this one. That's not the first time I've heard knocking on a window. Today was the most active we've seen in like 2 months. It's just really creepy. Well, those are the end of the stories today. I'm guessing I will see y'all on Thursday. I hope y'all have a great day. Remember, it's scary out there. I love y'all so much. Please like and subscribe. Howdy, y'all. It's Curious Raven. Hope y'all are doing good today. Today I have two short creepypastas for y'all. The first one I'm going to read is called I Must Honor My Agreement Now, I Have No Choice, and it is written by Skooma Dane. It is time to follow him to his lair. My time is up. I have to honor my agreement with this thing. How stupid I was. But how should I have known? Nobody believes in ghosts or spirits. Some do, of course, but I mean, such people are seldom taken seriously. It's so unreal. Is this really happening? The thing in my room certainly makes it real enough. It even talks to me. But now I am unable to understand the words. They almost hurt my ears. What happened? For the past 10 years, he had been so kind to me, fulfilling everything I had asked for. I even thought of him as a friend. Strange, I know. But he was always there for me, guiding me towards my deepest desires, making sure they happened just like I wanted them to. I have never been more afraid than I am now. I can actually feel the dread occupying my body. I'm certain. I know what will happen to me. I know what he will do to me once we arrive. There's no escaping now. It knows what I'm thinking. I should be careful. It was just a game, they said, a harmless ritual that had been performed 100 times. Did they know it would work? Probably not. If they did, I don't think they ever expected that thing in particular to be the one to answer. One of the worst, I'm told. A real tormentor. He has only ever presented himself for a select few over thousands of years he has existed, or so I am told. It does make me feel kind of special, I guess. The things I have seen throughout the last 10 years, shall I even describe them? Maybe some of the less morbid things, I guess. The riches he has gifted me, the first million was a real treat. I used it so fast I could hardly believe it. But of course, he just conjured up more somehow. He even won the lottery a few times. I guess it was all his doing. My childhood bully found himself in the hospital a few times, with broken legs and arms. They would seemingly break out of nowhere. Amazing stuff. It even made the news one time, when it was recorded by some bystanders. He should have died when he set himself on fire, but he wasn't allowed to die. My friend made sure of that. I think he still lingers in the hospital. I don't pity him. I'm still sitting on my bed, petrified to move. I have no idea I could be this afraid. I have even pissed my pants. Can I make him change his mind? No. There is simply no choice. He wants me. He wants my soul. Or at least some part of it. Do I deserve this? I sure took advantage of the situation. But who wouldn't? Nobody got hurt. I mean, nobody that didn't deserve it. All the criminals, rapists, and murderers that have been agonized in wicked ways, they surely deserved it. Even that guy who scratched his own eyes out while screaming for help, I will never forget that guy. I almost puked, but I think a part of me actually enjoyed it. I can feel it. He is becoming irritated with me. Something I don't want to happen. I'm walking slowly now towards him. His words are like piercing gunshots to my ears. I can't stand them. My pants are cold and wet. They reek of urine. But I dare not stop. Will anyone miss me? Will I just disappear? Or is he leaving my body behind? He is getting annoyed by all my thoughts. But I can't help it. My parents? Will they get sick again when I'm gone? What about all the children who have been miraculously cured from their cancer? He assures me everything will be fine. But should I believe him? It is time. I must leave or face his cruelty. Something I must avoid at all cost. I have no regrets, but I did feel the need to leave something behind. A little warning, I guess. At least just for my parents. They need to know. No, I have no regrets. I will do it all again. He tells me I will be safe. I must undress, take his hand, and follow him. It is time. I have never seen him up close before. He knows what I'm thinking. He wants me to put away my phone and undress. His eyes, they are so vile, just like his hooves. I must post this before I take your hand, master. One moment, I beg you. He controls my body. Some of it anyways. It is time. No more delays. That story is creepy. And as I was recording it, something fell in my room, and it scared me. Our next story is called Don't Fall Asleep by New Astronomer 4093. I sighed as I sunk my body lower into my steamy bubble bath. Today has been a day, and this lavender and eucalyptus bath was much needed. I laid my head back and closed my eyes as I relaxed. Suddenly my eyes popped open at the sound of knocking. I sat there listening, reluctant to leave my oasis. When I didn't hear anything, I closed my eyes again. Not even 2 minutes later, I heard the knock again, and this time I was fully alert. This time, I realized it wasn't at the door. It was coming from beneath the tub. Right when I was going to stand up, the tub gave away and I was plunged into darkness. And after the splash of the water hitting the ground, after a few moments, I heard what sounded like claws dragging across the concrete in a menacing laugh. Though I could still see nothing, I had no choice but to stand still and wait. The thing that was slowly clawing and cackling its way to me. The hairs on my neck stood up as I felt its hot breath. I slowly turned around, only to come face to face with what had to have been a 10-foot tall, thin creature with arms that ended in long, sharp claws. Its mouth turned up in an unnaturally wide mouth and sharp teeth. What stood out the most were its glowing red eyes. This has to be a dream, I thought to myself, right as it opened its mouth to say, "This isn't a dream. Didn't they warn you about falling asleep in the tub?" it questioned. I was frozen in shock and unable to speak. "You're mine now," it said as I felt its claw sink into my skin. I closed my eyes, choking on what had to be blood. When I opened them, though, I was on the bathroom floor surrounded by paramedics. As my vision cleared, I noticed the worried face of my best friend. With a sigh of relief, she said, "I came home to see you submerged in the water and called the paramedics, and they pulled you out. A few more seconds and you would have been a goner," said one paramedic. "Don't you know it's dangerous to fall asleep in the tub?" he scolded. Relief washed over me as I realized it was just a nightmare. "How'd you get that scratch?" my friend exclaimed. I looked down and stared in horror as I noticed long, deep claw marks going down my arm. I woke up in the hospital after apparently passing out. I glanced at my arm to see it bandaged up. Did I imagine everything? I asked myself out loud. I looked around the room and swore I saw a shadow in the corner. But I just told myself it was the medicine. I decided to try to go back to sleep and had just dozed off when I was yanked out of my bed. I opened my mouth to scream, but it was caught in my throat as I realized it was the same creature dragging me across the floor, nails digging into my ankle. "I told you were mine. You can't escape me," it said. I could feel the blood gushing out of my ankle as it began to drag me down the hallway, and I noticed the nurse's station was empty. Finally, my voice returned and I screamed at the top of my lungs. I must have startled the creature as it stopped, turned around, and stared at me with a growl. It lifted its claws, and as I continued to lay there screaming, I knew my end was near. I closed my eyes and awaited my death. Ma'am, I heard it say. I slowly opened my eyes and I realized I was surrounded by nurses. It was just another dream, I thought to myself as my ankle throbbed. That's when it clicked. I yanked the covers off me and heard the audible gasp as I looked at the deep wounds from when the creature was dragging me. The nurses looked at me in horror and my gaze was the same. I glanced in the corner again and could have sworn I saw a pair of red eyes, but when I blinked, it was gone. I breathed a sigh of relief, but I should have held that in because next thing I knew, a voice growled in a whisper in my ear. I'll be watching you. Then everything went black. Alright, those are the ends of those stories today for our Creepypasta Saturday. I love y'all so much. I hope y'all enjoyed them. I will see y'all on Tuesday. Until then, remember, it's scary out there. Please like and subscribe. Howdy y'all, it's Curious Raven. It's Creepypasta Saturday. I hope y'all have had a great week. I was a little medical issues on Thursday, and that's why I could not record. I felt real bad. So I'm back and I'm getting better. Let's start with this creepypasta. It is by That Wooden Cat Statue. And the title is My Girlfriend and I Were Giving a Home Intrusion Preparedness Test. October 26, 2006. Glide me towards you. Better's soothing tone set heavenly in my bleary brain, washing the tiresome swirl of another long workday ahead. Sam plopped down next to me on the couch, turning the knob on the radio a bit lower before pouring some wine in the glasses which sat before us. She placed her hand on my shoulder, moving her thumb in rhythmic circles. How was your day, baby? Her voice carried like a melody of concern, angelic as it was quizzical. Work had been stressful, and Sam knew the long hours were beginning to wear on my tired, aching body. Caring would be an understatement to describe her. I decided to forgo the glass and took a deep pull from the bottle instead. Just another day, Bugs, I replied. Meeting her curious eyes, I could feel the bags pull tight underneath my eyes as I conjured up as sincere of a smile as I could. I hope I didn't look as rough as I felt. She returned a warm smile as she ran her hand over my cheek. I'll put something on TV. You should try to relax. Take your shoes off, she said. Sam turned the radio off and squeezed my leg before hopping up to retrieve the remote. Suddenly she froze. Her gaze seemed to be fixed on the living room window. I'll never forget her eyes. Her eyes that always seemed so relaxed and worry-free were now replaced with something else. Terror. Pure terror. As a deer's eyes are in the Simi's headlights. Babe, I said, wincing at the break in eerie silence. He remained still. Sam whimpered and backed away as I jumped up from the couch. I looked out the window and I saw nothing. I moved closer, cautiously so. The night was still, the speckled sky casting dimly over the empty streets. Not a soul has been seen. What the hell's going on? I turned to Sam, who was still cowering against the wall. I remember her eyes, glazed primal with fear. She remained still, though her panic-stricken eyes drifted to look at me. Her body shook like a wanderer lost in a frozen tundra. Finally, she spoke. I saw someone looking in. Her voice cracked, hardly coming out above a whisper. I'd never seen her so scared before. I peered out the window once more, studying the incongruities of the night, wondering what might lurk in the darkest shadows neath the parked cars. I shivered. I don't see anything out there, baby, I said, feeling wholly unhelpful in easing her nerves. She stood now, carefully gliding back towards the couch. She brought the wine glass to her lips, the rim chattering against her teeth as she took a sip. She sighed. "Will you go out and check for me?" she asked, her green eyes beckoning like a lost pup. Despite my unease in entering the dark and the unsettling feeling which had begun to creep over me, I knew I couldn't say no. Of course, I tried my best to remain unwavering. Play the part of the fearless boyfriend. Approaching the door, I grabbed the Louisville Slugger, propped in the corner before heading outside. The neighbors are going to think I'm crazy, I thought, though I couldn't shake the fear and doubt which Sam's reaction had caused me. The night was cold, and when the wind blew, it was nearly unbearable. The end of the fall was nearing at that point. It was a kind of cold that makes you lose all of your senses, that drives the lizard part of your brain to seek shelter. The night hadn't been particularly dark, the glowing stars illuminating much of the vacant street. Despite this, I pulled the flashlight from my pocket and swept over the front yard. Crunchy amber leaves littered our yard in great piles, but aside from that, I couldn't make anything out might raise alarms. Not yet, at least. I stomped through the leaf piles, nearing the corner of the house to check our side yard. However, something stopped me. It felt as though thousands of strings had pulled the hair on the back of my neck, the shiver of fear now replacing that of the cold. I looked through our front window, seeing Sam's shadows watch as I made my security sweep. God, I probably looked like such a bitch. I stepped once, twice, holding my breath before poking my head around the corner. Nothing. More fallen foliage, and the buzzing heater had been waiting for me on the other side. I breathed a sigh of relief, knowing that Sam would be pleased that there wasn't some sort of deranged stalker on the loose. I stomped carelessly through the leaves, unconcerned about whatever ghoulish things might be watching beyond the shadows. I stopped before the door, my mouth following a gap. "Don't turn around." The page, which had been freshly taped to our front door, read. The world spun a bit, my heart throbbing angrily in my throat. I stood there for a moment, thoughts spinning wildly around my head. The feeling of being watched sat heavier now, my chest heaving up and down violently. No longer did it feel cold outside. I knew I didn't have long. I didn't have long before someone's axe would be sticking out of my back and poor Sam would find me belly up on the front steps. With whatever courage I had left to muster up, if there was any to begin with, I spun on my heels. Again, nothing. I'm not sure if that was worse or not. Took a step back, reaching behind me to tear the note off the door before sliding back inside. If Sam wasn't panicked before, I'm sure she is now, watching me frantically lock the door and shove the stopper underneath the handle. "What's going on? What did you see?" she practically screamed, running over towards me. I simply handed the crumpled sheet to her. Her eyes shot to and fro, reading the messy handwriting, repeatedly searching for answers that weren't there. He was as white as a sheet, face twisting up as tears began to bubble up from the corner of her eyes. "I'm gonna lock the windows. You call the cops," I said, trying my best to look and sound like I hadn't already pissed my pants. After I was confident that all the windows in our bedroom and the kitchen were locked and the blinds had been drawn, I returned to the living room to find Sam sat solemnly on the couch, her lip quivering as she cradled the phone in her hands. The phone's not working. It's just buzzing. I can't even dial anyone. She was trying hard not to completely lose it, her hands shaking violently as a steady stream of quiet, resigned tears fell down her cheeks. I held her close. I knew I had to hold my shit together, that I had to get us through the night and keep Sam calm. I walked over to the couch, as nonchalantly as possible, keeping the bat handy as I sat down next to her. "Why don't you put some TV on? We'll just ride the night out and leave in the morning. I don't think it's safe to go outside right now anyways." Sam winced, squeezing the phone tighter in her hands. I continued, "Besides, it's probably just some idiots trying to mess with us." We remained on the couch, For a long while, reruns of Judge Judy playing quietly on the television, as the shadows of our home didn't seem to so deep and threatening now. I'd been lying earlier. Maybe it was really just some dumb kids trying to play a prank on us. My nerves began to recede, and seeing Sam sleeping peacefully had made me tired myself. Then a fierce knock at the door shook us both awake. Gate City Police Department. I'd like a quick word. Authoritative voice boomed from beyond the portal. Sam hopped up to the couch, eyeballing the front door as she took a cautious step forward. I pulled her back down. Wait a second, I said, turning to the window behind us to peek through the blinds. I'm not sure what I was planning to see. Perhaps some ghoulish figure dressed in all black waiting for his victims to unwittingly open the door. But standing at our doorstep was what appeared to be a regular everyday officer. I breathed a sigh of relief and made my way towards the door, opening just a few inches so that the rest of my body was concealed. Silly as it may have been, I kept the bat in hand tucked behind me. Hello? I blurted out, unaware how anxious I really was. The officer smiled and seemed to ease up a bit himself. Sorry to scare you, son. We've been getting complaints in this area. Someone, he paused for a moment, seemed to choose his words carefully. Basically, someone's been leaving weird notes and looking through windows, knocking on everyone's door, you know? He continued, his eyes furrowing as he seemed to study my face. We both remained silent for a moment. Bring me that note, I said, motioning Sam over. I talked with the officer for a while, confirming that the very same thing had happened to us earlier the night. He kept our note as evidence, reassuring that a squad car would patrol the street for the remainder of the night. Well, anyways, sorry to wake you folks up so late. Hope y'all can get some rest, he said, before turning to walk off. Thank you, sir. What was your name? I never got it. I'm not sure why I felt the need to ask, but the words just seemed to fall out. It's Mark. Officer Mark Weaver, sir, he replied as he continued a short walk back to his car. That was that, I suppose. The night continued on as it had before. We remained on the couch, the slugger still nearby, just in case. Once again, with the TV droning and the soft hum of the fan overhead, we found ourselves wrapped in each other's embrace, drifting merrily off to sleep. Peace wouldn't last so long this time. Another knock emanated from the front door, maybe 20 minutes after it happened the first time. It seemed frantic, the quiet knocks coming in rapid successions. I'm not sure how long this had gone on before we both shot awake. Please, let me in. The voice on the other side sounded familiar. A little bit more husky, seemingly wheezy and grunting in pain. I jumped up from the couch and peeked through the blinds once more, my eyes surely deceiving me, my dreaming brain surely conjuring up this horrible sight before me. I lingered there watching the bloodied officer for a moment, my mouth surely agape. Sam darted for the door and opened it before I could say anything, allowing Officer Weaver to fall in a heap on our living room floor. Blood poured generously from the man's stomach, collecting in a ruby-hued pool on our floor. I winced at his pained groans. I have to commend Sam for her quick thinking in that moment. Running to the bathroom to get a towel as I stood there like a bumbling idiot. The officer and I remained there, his guttural cries the only thing penetrating the stillness and silence. Sam returned with the towel, shoving it in my hands and instructing me to put weight on the officer's wound. As I fumbled with the towel and attempted to pull Mark out of the fetal position he was in, I could hear Sam putting her shoes and coat on. What are you doing? I hissed. I'm going to get help. Stay here with him. She was frantically trying to pull the other shoe on, her foot before making her way towards the door. No, Mark said between his labored breaths. Finally, he turned over to face us. His face had turned a sickening pallor. There's two. He took a moment, clutching at his gushing abdomen. There's two of them out there. They have knives, he cautioned, pulling up his shirt It showed the severity of his injury. From what I could see before the gash filled once more with the red stuff. It didn't look good. Sam had covered her eyes, blocking the heinous scene away. I could hear her whispering to herself, whispering soft prayers to God she'd announced long ago. Take this, stay here, till the others come. Mark wheezed, using whatever strength he had left to unclip the firearm from his holster. She shoved the thing in her shaky hands. I'm sure if Sam or I would have been the better candidate at that point to use the gun, but it seemed he'd made the decision for us. I looked over at Sam, who had taken up residence on the floor, her head tucked between her legs. The soft whispering, the soft prayers continued. Suddenly, the officer began to violently rattle, the husky wheezing now replaced with sharp, painful croaks before finally falling still. Oh, fuck. The words seemed to just fall out of my mouth. I dropped to my knees beside the officer, clutching at his still warm hands, as my mind began to swirl down the drain of resignation. I could feel hot tears beginning to well up. Our cries, our pleas for help, for the officers, some sort of deity to come to our rescue, were soon replaced with more violent knocks on the door. It seemed more angry this time, unrelenting. Sam clawed at the floor, crawling as quickly away to the wall opposite to the front door, planted my back against the wall next to her, readying the gun in my hand. Even with the front door being 10 or so feet away, I'd be lucky to hit anything with how fiercely my hands had been shaking. The constant knocking seemed to slow before being replaced with something much more sinister. Beyond the door I could hear soft scratches, much like a cat trying to escape a room or a cage they're locked in. Scratches grew heavier, running into heavy scrapes, which squealed along the length of the door. The mess of the Sam's cries and scraping on the floor filled the room, sending me into a fit of dizzying nausea. Finally, however, the scraping seemed to come to an end. My raw, weary eyes drifted toward the dead cop on the floor before shifting to the door, which concealed whatever horrors might lie beyond it. Sam cried softly next to me, hopelessness. I dropped my head back into the wall, which created an audible bang that made Sam jump. All I could do was laugh. Perhaps this was the gladiators felt as I lay on the gritty arena floor, a sword threatening to puncture their throat. A heinous crash sent glass splintering down to the kitchen floor. Then silence. I jumped up, readying the gun as adrenaline replaced my resolved demeanor. The kitchen was concealed by the corner of the living room, concealing the monsters which had taken up residence in our once peaceful home, and our home. A surge of anger pushed me forward and around the corner as I attempted to empty the clip. The firearm only clicked with every pull of the trigger. Click, click, click. I stepped back in horror, realizing it had never been loaded. I looked up from the gun. A brick laying on the floor had been the culprit of the broken window. What waste of bullets that would have been. I threw the gun down, shuffling closer now to the brick, which laid in a heap of shattered glass. Another note was attached. We're already inside. I hardly had time to read the zanely written note before Sam's screams caught me off guard. I spun on my heels, ready to give whoever threatened my baby a fight like hell. Sam and the officer's body were gone. I looked to the front door, which was now hanging wide open, cold fall air pressing gently over my bowling skin. I darted for the door, giving the assailants a little time as possible to get away. It's strange, I was no longer afraid of what might happen to me. I reached the door, looking out into the night. Among the pools of crunchy amber leaves, among the still parked cars, stood a man dead in the center of the walkway leading to our home. From what I could see through the shadows of the night, he wore a white dress shirt tucked neatly into his brown slacks. His hair was slicked back, and he began to approach the door, making the sawed-off shotgun in his hand apparent as he tapped it against his thigh. Fucking do it. Fucking shoot me, I screamed through gritted teeth. Leave her alone. I was cut short, a rough arm taking a hold of my neck from behind. I tried to scream, to wiggle my way out, but whoever had me was much stronger. The stranger in front of me grew closer as the world began to fade black. Despite my struggles, the Despite having my loved one taken away from me, there was nothing I could do. The last thing I remember seeing was the butt of his shotgun. When I awoke, when I opened my eyes again, the world remained black. My hands were bound, my head buzzing and swirling, like the gnarliest hangover one could endure. I tried to move, stand from the chair I had found myself to be bound in. I slumped backwards, my mind dulled beyond point of caring. I could hear someone sniffling near me, struggling against what I assumed to be their own restraints. The pain from trying to speak, to cry out to help, was so immense that to shock me out of my stupor, all that I could muster were soft groans, pathetic whimpering. Josh? It was Sam, her voice quivering even worse than it had earlier. Her distress continued. Josh, is that you? She grew frantic. I couldn't speak, the pain in my jaw searing throughout my entire face. The butt of his shotgun must have broken it. Was all that I could manage, but even that felt agonizing. I'm sure how long we remained seating, wherever we were, bound to those chairs. Minutes, hours, days, I'm really not sure. The only thing I knew was that a burlap sack had been placed over my head, its rough material beginning to rub the tip of my nose raw. I sat quietly, with silence occasionally broken by Sam pleading and whimpering. After calming a bit, I'd come to the conclusion that we were still home. Still in the living room, no less. The very same reruns of Judge Judy continued on in the background. The very same reruns we'd watched peacefully before our world came crashing down. Beyond the two of us, it was utterly silent, nothing stirring in the room around us. A long while passed before rescue finally arrived. I could hear several voices and several more beyond that on the radios, which the police who'd entered our home had with them. Eventually, we were freed from our restraints, having been tied down with baling twine to our own chairs. Despite a black eye and various bruises, Sam seemed to be alright, physically at least. I wasn't so lucky. My jaw had been broken, as I suspected, along with several teeth having been knocked out in the process. My entire body felt black and blue. The police gave us a once-over, determining that we hadn't sustained any life-threatening injuries. They questioned us as much as possible. Investigators and neighbors outside and eager to see what had happened. One of the officers, his name I don't recall, showed us a sheet of paper they'd found hung from our front door. Unlike the other notes that had been left before, this one was written in such a finer script. Home Intrusion Preparedness Test. This home had been thoroughly studied and the behavior of its occupants researched before testing took place. We determined that the two occupants were in their mid to late 20s and had minimal to no security system in place, including alarms, weapons, pets, etc. Very limited action was taken before the occupants succumbed to their fear, allowing their emotion and cloud good judgment. The home invasion took place at approximately 10:15 p.m. and concluded at approximately 11:50 p.m. After the occupants had been subdued, taking all of this into consideration, it's with our best judgment that we score this house a D+ on our preparedness scale. We can only hope that future homes yield better results. Truly, I wish I could say that was the end of it, that the nightmare had finally ended. Despite all of this, despite the chilling note they left, I'll never forget seeing Mark Weaver standing among those crowding our front yard as they escorted us with an ambulance. To this day, 17 years later, no one has been caught for what they did to us. Ooh, that was chilling. Well, we can say Officer Weaver was in on it, don't you think? Creepy. That gave me chills. I hope y'all like that story. I love y'all so much. I hope y'all have a good rest of your weekend. I'll see y'all Tuesday. But until then, remember it's scary out there. Please like and subscribe. Howdy, y'all. It's Curious Raven on Creepypasta Saturday. Today we have one story. It is by Marinero Ron, and the title is called I Haven't Seen My Roommate in Over a Year. Guilt my girlfriend feels about what happened to him is about to consume her. At 23 years old, I guess I'm technically an adult. I certainly don't feel like one right now. In fact, all I can think about is calling my conservative parents back in the Midwest and pleading with them for help. Oh, what I wouldn't give to just run away all the way back home. I could just imagine myself snuggling up in my childhood bed and pulling the cartoon-style bed sheets over my head just to let all my adult problems fade away. Damn it, I can't though. I need to be braver than this. My worried girlfriend needs me to be braver than this. We're both in it together, I suppose. If only I could somehow hide just how terrified I am in front of her. That would probably make Gwen feel better, safer. But no, every innocuous little bump in the night or intrusive ding from either our phones leave me visibly flinching each and every freaking time. I just don't know what to do. Maybe I should start at the beginning. I'll tell you what I know, and maybe it will make sense to you. It's possible that I'm overthinking all of this, truth to be told. This all started about 1 year ago today. It was the second week in November, and the rent on my expensive city apartment was already late. The reason? My fucking horrible, self-absorbed, immature, and all-around slimy roommate, Clint. Taking him on as a roommate was the worst decision I had ever made. Always a super spreader of destruction and inconvenience. If only I had kicked him out when I had the chance. Anyway, it was the second week in November, like I was saying, and one Friday evening in walks Clint. Clint always knew how to make a loud entrance, and that time was no exception. He immediately hollered and said, "I got our rent covered, brah." I was skeptical, knowing his penchant for exaggeration, but I looked up from my phone and noticed how utterly bizarre he looked. In his hand he was holding a paycheck. The other arm was fixed to his side in a fresh cast. Obviously his arm was broken. He was also decked out in some kind of sci-fi or cosplay type of outfit. Completely bizarre even for him. "What the hell happened to you?" I asked. "I got our rent, dude. Also, I got a lead on a way to make some big bucks," he exclaimed, somehow oblivious at how skeptically I was looking at him. "What happened to your arm?" "Oh, this? It'll heal in no time. I was downtown. There was a protest for higher pay for educators or something. I was there and it got a little rowdy. But anyway, I got paid." "Paid for what?" I asked. "I don't know. Some recruiting company just told me to show up looking like a goofball and try and draw a bunch of attention to myself during the protest. Then they cut me in a check. So cool." I still didn't get what Clint was going on about. I tried to ask him more information. All he seemed like he wanted to talk about was this new idea that he had. Anyway, I saw Gwen downtown when I was there. Just bumped into her on the street. Did she talk with you about this already? No. I doubted any interaction between Clint and Gwen was purely by chance. He probably happened to drop by the clothing store where she worked. Yeah, so it was right outside of her work. She was talking about how all these rich people come in and buy these ridiculous purses and bags, and I was like, why are they so expensive? Do you know what she said? I was still processing the fact that he saw Gwen today and didn't answer, at least I didn't think so. "It's because they control the supply. It's simply supply and demand, brah. They keep the inventory super low, and they are good enough quality that everyone is scrambling to get one," he said enthusiastically. "So what?" "Well, according to Gwen, the brand that makes these purses has their headquarters and distribution centers right outside of the city. The supply is artificially low at the stores. We can just sneak over there before the end of the year, before they destroy the overstocked quantity for the year, and grab some." No one would know, and we could sell them secondhand for thousands. I'm talking like 20,000 per purse. I was already calling Gwen after he finished talking. She was supposed to get off soon, and I couldn't wait to talk to her about this strange interaction they had today. Gwen hated Clint, and I couldn't see how they would have this type of conversation. When I finally got a hold of her, she confirmed what Clint told me. Apparently, they had talked vaguely about this, and she was going to talk to me. Nothing illegal, but if they are going to incinerate them anyway, maybe we can grab a few. It'll be a few years before we can actually afford one ourselves, she added. Besides, maybe we can get several and resell them, who knows? I remember thinking at the time that this was it. I was going to kick Clint out and finally move in with Gwen. Money would be tight for the next year, but I knew I would be fine. I just had to talk her out of the strange scheme that Clint had cooked up, and we could start the next chapter in our lives. Well, it turned out that Gwen was pretty adamant to this crazy plan with Clint. I don't know whether it was the allure of his mythical designer bag, the fact she fell for Clint's false charm, or some other side of her that I was unfamiliar with. But eventually they talked me into it too, begrudgingly. I was now an accomplice in their delusional scheme to save a few designer bags from a premature death. It was 1 week later when all three of us hopped in my scratched up blue sedan and we started our journey out of the city. It took about an hour to make it to the facility, or at least what we thought at the time was the facility. This was in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by thick forest and awful roads. The fact it was night and the road lights were spared made for a very scary drive. I don't know how people that worked there made the commute safely. Anyway, the facility looked brand new. We parked about half a mile away and made our way to what looked like their warehouse building. It had some docking areas and truck park out front. It's a bit eerie to see such a modern marvel in the middle of a wild nature, but there it was. Clint was laughing and chatting with Gwen, who seemed really excited with the whole adventure. I guess that I was even feeling a bit excited too, as we made our way to the building and started to joke around with them. Do you think they have a men's section? I joked. At this point, we figured the whole place was closed, which was odd because it was technically Black Friday. I would assume they would have some sort of nightmare activity in a place like this, but this place seemed closed. It was actually dead quiet until a scream pierced the night. Well, not a scream exactly, like a loud squeaking. Couldn't quite place it. What do you think that is? Gwen asked Clint as I trailed along. She seemed spooked. I don't know. It should be around here, Clint said, making no attempt to be quiet and rounding around the backside of the warehouse. No way, Gwen gasped. The sight that greeted us was so bizarre that I immediately knew we must be in the wrong place. There, tied to a stake in the ground, was a shaking lamb. It seemed to be crying out in the middle of the night, looking for something. Maybe its mother? Who would do that? Gwen asked. She started to walk towards it before I grabbed her arm. The lamb was tied to a stake in what appeared to be an empty space in the surrounding field. However, in looking closer, next to the lamb, probably 20 feet away, were piles and piles of shoes, like fancy boots and high-heeled shoes. Next to those were scattered dresses and suits, and finally at the end of these slight rolling hills of luxury were the designer bags. What the hell? Clint said, looking at the scene. The lamb kept crying out, but suddenly an even sharper sound appeared right behind us. Shluma. Then he smiled. He said some other stuff and I couldn't understand. Then he pointed behind us. We all three looked. Lahar, he said. He repeated it several times. There in the distance, behind all the stacks of luxury clothes and the frightened lamb, was a large statue of a woman. I think it was a woman. She stood there in a simple white dress like toga and held a lamb. What the fuck? I said under my breath. When I turned around, Clint was pulling his fist back on his good arm and slamming it into the giant's jaw. The large man fell with a huge thud. slamming his head against the ground. "Clint, what the fuck?" I shouted in a whisper. He then said, "Let's just grab some shit and get out of here. I'll go free that lamb and you two grab whatever you can." And he was off. I wanted us to run out of there and return to the car. I had no idea what was happening, but what I did know was I was scared out of my mind. Gwen was shrieking in hysterical fear and ran off to the pile of clothes. Instead of grabbing anything, though, she ducked down to hide. We followed close behind her. "Gwen, we need to get out of here. Something strange is going on here," I said to her. I could see tears running down her eyes. Suddenly Clint shouted, "Got it!" And the lamb was free. It bolted off foolishly into the night. Gwen and I both made our way closer to the building, away from the area with the statue and clothes. Clint just stood there with a self-satisfied grin on his face. I was about to shout out to him to run, but suddenly Gwen put her hand over my mouth. "Shh," she whispered, and pointed out to the field. Suddenly, 3 more large men, similarly dressed to the first one, was sprinting towards Clint, who hadn't noticed them yet. They tackled him, catching him almost totally by surprise. He had barely enough time to turn his head before they had him knocked out on the ground. "Shit, what do we do?" Gwen asked me, digging her fingernails into my forearm. "I'll call the police. This is insane." That's when I realized I dropped my phone out in the field when Gwen and I started running. It was now located not too far from where they were dragging Clint. "Do something," Gwen shouted in a low of a whisper as she could manage. The 3 men now accompanied by others, all dressed in utterly bizarre, anachronistic type of clothing. The closest that I could tell was it was Greek or something, but I had no idea. I didn't move. I couldn't. I was paralyzed with fear. We watched the strange people tie Clint to the stake where the lamb was. Suddenly the sound of machinery started up, and we could see some kind of forklifts or warehouse machinery pushing the piles of luxury items closer to Clint. "Lazar!" all the people were chanting in unison. There must have been around 20 of them there now. Some were carrying lit torches. "Gwen, we need to get back to the car. We have to get out of here and get help. Your phone is in the car. We can call for help," I said. Gwen could barely keep herself together, but I think my plan was better than nothing, so I led her back to the car. We found a path around the other side of the warehouse. It was dark, but I was fairly sure no one would see us. "It'll be okay," I kept saying, mostly to myself, unconvincingly. We finally got to the car that was parked slightly off the road, and that's when it happened. The shouting had reached a crescendo and massive flames licked up towards the sky. A quick scream, this time I'm pretty sure was not a lamb, filled with the night air before harshly and suddenly stopping. It was miles before we finally had cell phone reception. We just kept driving. We drove in silence all the way back to the city without calling anyone. I don't know whether it was the trauma and what we experienced, but we didn't go to the police until the next day. Gwen was constantly crying, and I just didn't know what to say. Was it some cult or something? I mean, that was definitely the facility to a huge international corporation. What had we got ourselves into? We explained ourselves, or tried to at least, first to some bewildered-looking cops. Then we were introduced to a senior detective who identified himself as Detective Simri, and we recounted everything. He nodded sympathetically as we told him absolutely everything. The detective said not to worry, everything would be okay. Gwen and I spent the entire Saturday at the police station. Most of it just us together in some kind of conference room waiting for the detective to return. Finally, around 8 p.m., the detective came in and said not to worry, that Clint was okay. Apparently, it was some big misunderstanding, and he was safe back home at his grandparents, who lived a state over. You kids should be more careful. The company had allowed some film crew to shoot some movie out there, and you all stumbled onto that. They agreed not to press any charges. You all should be more careful in the future, the detective said, still with his odd-looking smile. No, that's not right. It was not a movie, I started to say, but he put his hand up to silence me. Look, I get it. If anything more comes of any of this, I'll get in contact. I have your information, he said with another smile. I looked down at the floor searching for something to say, and that's when I noticed them, his impeccable and expensive-looking designer shoes. We've been living with this for over a year now, and we still haven't seen or heard directly from Clint. Clint was unreliable, but he wouldn't just vanish like that. I can't get any of this out of my head. The designer shoes that the detective was wearing, the pathetic crying of a lamb, or the sight of the strange men in their ancient clothing. What the heck am I supposed to do now? That was the end of the story. That was an interesting story. I liked it. I kind of wish it went longer, like there was another part of it that went deep into what was out there and stuff. But yeah, those cops are definitely in on it. But thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope y'all enjoyed it. I want to say happy Saturday, and I will see y'all on Tuesday. I love y'all so much. Remember, it's scary out there. Please like and subscribe. Howdy, y'all. It's Curious Raven. Is Creepypasta Saturday. Hope y'all's week has been good. Everybody's okay. Today we have a story. It's by Cool Panda 180, and it's called The Sister. Okay, I'm going to be honest. I'm scared. Very, very scared. That's why I'm writing this. And I know there is going to be one person who is like, you should go to the police. Well, first off, shut up. Second of all, I have my older brother who is a police officer, and we are currently investigating the situation. But I feel like something bad might happen. So I figured that I should let someone else know what has happened to me. So here we go. It started this last fall. It was a cold day and the air was chilling me to my bones. I never gave the fall much thought. It was always just another season to me. But this year, I felt myself checking behind my back every 20 minutes. Maybe it was because of her. When I arrived at my college, the building loomed overhead. I sighed before walking in. The warm air from the heater blasted me in the face. I brushed past the kids blocking the walkway, giving me angered glances. Paid them no mind. I'm used to people glaring at me. I walked over to the biology wing of the community college. Walking into the room, and a girl caught my eye. She had 2 long scars that started from her lips up to her earlobes. Her bright green eyes stared ahead as she looked at the equations on the board. Her white hair shining underneath the overhead fluorescent lights. I avoided her and sat down in my seat. I pulled open my textbook and started to work on my homework before the bell rang for class to start. "Hey, Mark," said a voice. I turned around to see Sarah. Her glasses were perched on her nose, her blue eyes looking down to me. "Oh, hey, Sarah," I replied. She took a seat next to me and opened her own textbook. "Are you excited for the project?" she asked. I guess I am," I replied. "Well, I'm hoping we get to pick partners," she said. I hummed in response, turning my face away from her. "How is Sienna and Brianna doing?" I asked to break the silence. "They are doing good. They didn't notice my haircut this morning," she said. It was then when I recognized her hair. She had indeed cut it. Her usual shoulder-length brown hair was now a pixie cut. "I'm going to be honest," I started. "I didn't even notice it." She groaned. "You all are blind." I laughed in response, paying no mind to the white-haired girl in the corner boring her eyes into my back. It was about 30 minutes later when the last bit of students arrived into the classroom and the lesson started. "All right, as many of you know, today we are going to start working on a project," said Mr. Brown. "But due to some issues, I have decided to assign partners instead of letting you pick them." The entire class groaned. I turned to Sarah, who was giving me a somewhat pleading look. "On that note, let's get to it. Mr. Brown assigned each of us, and I perked up when I heard my name. Mark Keith and Sheila White," finished Mr. Brown. I felt my blood run cold as I looked over at the young white-haired female in the corner. No, 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 I thought. This can't be happening. This has to be a dream. Suddenly, Sarah's voice brightened me out of my daze. "Well, good luck with the freak," she said before grabbing her backpack and moving to go sit with her partner. I gulped before grabbing my backpack and went over to the white-haired female. She paid no attention as I sat down. Instead, she kept looking through her textbook before finally speaking up. "Stop being so stiff. You out of anyone should know better than to trust rumors," she said suddenly. I turned my head away from her and instead brought out my textbook, flipping through it. Though out of the corner of my eyes, I could see her roll her eyes. "Look, I don't bite, so stop acting like I'm going to kill you," she said. I looked over at her. "Your entire family are psycho, and you expect me not to be on edge?" I said. "Correction, my sister is. My parents are into business and other things, but they're not murderers," she said. "Sure, whatever," I mumbled. "You're just like the rest of them. You're a sheep," she said. I slammed my hands on the counter. "I am not a sheep," I yelled. Sheila raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure about that?" she said. It was when I noticed everyone in class was looking at me, and I gulped before sitting back down. "Good boy," said the female before flipping through her book to a page. "Let's do anatomy on an aardvark," she said. I nodded my head in agreement, not bothering to pay her any attention after that. "Okay, we're going to pause right here, because I feel like I need to give a little context to why nobody likes this girl. You see, there was an incident quite a few years back when her younger sister killed several people and hung their heads on hooks in a barn in the backyard of the house. The young girl was sent to a mental asylum, and Sheila's parents left, only giving her a check for rent and stuff every month. The incident with her sister happened when Sheila was 16. She is 22 at the time of writing, or at least I think. I don't really know anymore. After that, she changed. She became distant. Her hair turned white. She started to wear a mask. It was only when it fell off her face on a very windy day in high school when we all realized that she had been carving a smile into her face. No one ever talked to her really after that. Even I never wanted to talk to her after that. Why would she never tell her best friend she was struggling? Anyway, enough of my rambling. I'm not here to give you all my entire life story. I walked out of the classroom with a skull on my face. "Mark, wait up," called a voice. I turned to see Sarah. I sighed. "I don't want to hear it," I said. "Hear what? I was just going to ask you how it went with the freak," she asked. "You know, I'm not scared of her, but even I know better than to call her a freak," I said, turning to Sarah. Sarah scolded at me. "Taking her side now, huh?" she asked. "No, I'm just saying you have no idea what she is capable of, Sarah. I would suggest being careful what you say," I said. Of course, Sarah would not listen to me, and the next thing I knew, I was breaking up a fight between the two of them in the cafeteria. The two of them were dragged into the principal's office. "Geez, thankfully that bitch is now gone," said Brianna. I rolled my eyes. "Yeah, she was super annoying," said Sienna. "You guys need to stop. There is no point in this," I said. "Taking her side now, Mark," said Brianna. "No, I just don't think there is a point to this anymore. Sure, I don't like her, but I don't go around calling her a freak. So try and make her life a living hell." Brianna rolled her eyes. "Sure, totally. Not like she deserves it." She carved a smile into her face, Mark. "What type of person does that?" said Sienna. I rolled my eyes before walking away. It may be lunch, but it was the end of the school day anyway. I walked home looking through my contacts. Let's pray that I still have her number on my phone, I thought. I felt myself smile when I found it. I clicked on messages and an array of messages popped up, ranging from happy ones to ones when I remember her calling me in the middle of the night, crying due to her sister. I dropped her a quick message for a meetup before she very likely got suspended. I immediately got a response back with an address. I continued to walk home. A familiar feeling of being watched suddenly crept up my spine. Then suddenly there was a piercing feeling in my head. As the sound of static filled my head, I turned my head, my heart beating out of my chest. My breathing quickened at the edge of the forest standing by an abandoned play park was a tall figure. It wore a tuxedo and had paper white skin. The most noticeable thing was a lack of a face. I felt the fear crawl up on my spine as it seemingly stared at me before turning and walking away. I stood frozen before running as fast as I could to my house, which at this point was not too far. But by the time I got home, my lungs burned and my head had a splitting headache. There is no way that was real, I thought. Scrambled through my drawers for a bottle of pills. I recognized the labels of my schizophrenia medication and swallowed the meds quickly before taking some ibuprofen. I could have sworn I took them earlier, I thought. I looked down at the pill back and realized that I hadn't. As I sat down by my bedstand, catching my breath, I felt my phone ding. I looked down to a text message from Sheila, telling me she was out of school and if they could meet up at her house to figure out the rest of the project. I sent her a quick text message before gathering my bearings and heading out the door. I opened it quickly before walking down the street. The feeling of being watched is still there. I think this is where we take another break. You see, I have schizophrenia, and I have had it since I was young. It developed when I was 15. It was also a vision type. Anyway, her house is large. It was the same house her sister killed those kids, and it was the same house where the incident occurred. I would say that it is cursed, but it really is not. Though, if I was the homeowner, I would never tell anyone what occurred in that house. Anyway, when I arrived, she opened the door and her signature frown still on her face. I stepped into the house. You already know where everything is. I'm not going to bother showing you around, she said. I nodded my head as she led the way to the library of her house. I walked in a large room with many books lining the shelves. I watched as she pulled down a few books. So since you act like a third grader, I brought down a few books that talked about aardvarks for their reading level. I rolled my eyes before grabbing a book and sat down reading it, writing down any interesting information I found. Before long, it was about 7 o'clock at night, I yawned. Hey Sheila, I'm going to get going, I said. I looked over at her head resting on a pillow, softly snoring. I quickly grabbed a blanket and threw it over her, making sure she was comfortable. I then quickly left her house and went home. I don't know what happened, but our relationship improved after that night. I noticed her smile more and be more talkative with me even after our project was done. We continued to hang out, and before long I stopped talking to Sarah. With my lead, Sheila seemed to form a little bit of a friend group of her own. Little did I know that actually being her friend again would be the worst decision that I have ever made. Sarah disappeared one day. She had an argument a few days prior about Sheila, and then she stormed off and I brushed it off. But it was weird for her to be gone for days straight. As I pondered this thought, I looked out the window and saw it again. A figure, my blood running cold. I felt my heart beat faster, threatening to break out of my chest. I turned my head quickly, but the figure would not let me. There was a sudden noise of static. I felt myself grip my head and scream suddenly. I heard a voice call out my name. Mark, Mark, said the voice. I brought my head up to the voice, and the static stopped. I then turned to look at the window, and the man was no longer there. I turned my head to the voice. Sheila sat with her eyes filled with worry. Are you okay? She asked. There was a man out there, I stammered out. Silly Mark, there was no one out there, she said. I felt my blood run cold, and I buried my head into my hands. I shook my head as I felt my heart beat faster and my breathing. Something was very off about what was going on. I stared at the female before grabbing my stuff and moving spots, brushing off her widening smile. A few days later, I felt really bad and decided to walk over to Sheila's house. I knocked on the door. There was nothing. I brushed it off and opened the door. The lights were off as I walked about, calling out the young female's name. But that was when I noticed it. The back door was open, just like the night that Sheila's sister was found. I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up, before I walked out to the back of the yard. There was a light coming from the red barn. I walked over to a crack and peeked in. Suddenly, though, my blood ran cold and my heart began to quicken. Brianna, Sienna, and Sarah, all strapped to chairs. Brianna's normally blonde hair was a now dark, dirty yellow. Her fingernails now gone. Sienna was left unscathed for the most part, and Sarah, her eyes were gone and each and every one of her nails were missing. She also looked like she had hot wax poured on her. But then there was another girl. She was at least 6'7". Her white hair was pulled back in a ponytail and her skin was paper white. She wore a long white tuxedo jacket with horizontal stripes on the sleeves. The sleeves covered her hands and she had a black undershirt and a black tie. She also had pencil skirts and black tights. But her most striking feature was her smile. The scar on her face stretched from her lips to her ears. It was Sheila. I felt the tears run down my face, but I couldn't take my eyes away from her. I felt like I was in a sort of a trance. "We're going to play a little game with you, too," she said suddenly. Sarah began to shake her head no. "No? Why not?" asked Sheila. Sarah whimpered. "I asked you a question," said Sheila as she stabbed a knife through Brianna's leg and the girl screamed. Sarah shook her head. "No." "Please stop," she whimpered. Sheila laughed, her eyes widening. "No," said Sheila, before stopping almost like she was thinking something. "Aw, but I don't want to. I was having fun." She suddenly said, "Well, you three, our fun is now over. My brother said I had to stop now," she said. "But he did say we could play one final game. Though I'm going to keep Sarah. She is too easy." "What is that supposed to mean, you fucking bitch?" screamed Brianna. Sheila turned her head quickly, staring down the female before grabbing her throat. "Oh, Brianna, you naive little bitch. You should be glad I don't just kill you right here, right now. After all, you do deserve it more than most." "I dare you to do it then, Sheila." Suddenly, her smile widened as I watched her arms grow longer, her fingers growing into long claws. Her facial features are disappearing. I held back my own screams when she suddenly grabbed Brianna from the chair, the rope cutting into her wrists and ankles as Sheila tossed her to the other side of the room. She got up to run, but found that she couldn't. Suddenly, there was a ripping sound as a mouth formed on Sheila's face, her teeth long and jagged. The smile, that terrifying smile, reached up to her ears. She let out a low laugh, and white tendrils erupted from her back. They seemed to be covered in some sort of fur, with little spikes at the end of each one. She started screeching like some sort of animal. She picked Brianna up and slammed her on the ground. The female screamed in pain. She was then picked up again and slammed harder on the ground, like she was some sort of doll. I quickly turned away, covered my ears, with tears running down my face, as Brianna screamed. And when they finally stopped, I turned back to the scene, quickly regretting it. Entrails were thrown everywhere. Sheila stood in the back to what seemed normal. She then licked the blood off her hands. "Now you two, do you guys have anything else to say?" Sienna quickly shook her head no. "Good. Sienna, what are you going to do?" is you're going to try and find these pages, said Sheila, holding up 8 pages. I will be in the forest trying to hunt you. If you manage to follow the rules and get all pages, you'll get to leave, and if you don't, you'll be my next meal. Understood? What are your rules? asked Sienna. You show the paper game. You know the paper game, Sheila asked. I felt my breath hitch as Sheila circled the chairs. The blonde nodded her head. Well, it is the same thing. Just don't look into the trees, said Sheila with a smirk. I didn't hear the blonde's response after that. I quickly ran out of there before I would see any more carnage. But before I got back to the house, I heard it again. The static filling my head. I turned my head to see the figure staring at me. What does it want with me? Why does it keep doing this to me? I cried out into my head, tears running down my face. But instead of curling up, I ran as fast as I could. It was a few days later when they found Sienna and Sarah's bodies. They were found torn up and Sheila was missing. Felt dread rise up and tears run down my face. I stopped turning up to school after that day. The feeling of being watched has never left me. She has never left me. Sometimes she tries and tempts me with her body by dressing in a Playboy bunny costume. And other days I will see her just watching me. I have a feeling it is going to end soon. Update. That was where he died, right under a tree next to her house. We never gave it much thought. Mark was always a little crazy, and then he comes to the police station with this elaborate story of this girl killing people and how nuts she was. Kinda wished I would have listened to him sooner. There have been sightings of a man with a trench coat and gray skin and black soulless eyes with a weird black substance coming out of them. And for whatever reason, he also has wings. For some reason I know it is Mark, but whenever people go near him, there is a substance that is often flung at them, dissolving their skin. I'm an example, but I somehow survived. Maybe it is because I am his brother. I would never know. Sometimes the bodies are found with raven feathers embedded into them. Though I will never know what really happened the night of his disappearance and what had happened to him. I know he had a feeling of being watched for months. Sometimes out of the corner of my eyes I could see a figure of a girl dressed in a Playboy bunny costume or a tuxedo, like she is tempting me to follow her. And I have a feeling it is going to end soon. That was a crazy story. Very scary, I can tell you that. I hope y'all enjoyed it. Have a good rest of your Saturday and the rest of your weekend. I'll see y'all on Tuesday. But until then, remember, it's scary out there. Please like and subscribe. Howdy y'all, it's Curious Raven. I am back with another spooky paranormal story. This is one story. It's kind of long. I hope y'all enjoy it. I've never posted anything on here before, and I've stopped telling people about my experiences because I had always gotten the changes the subject immediately reaction. I guess I'm just not sure what to do with these experiences. I feel like they are decently significant and I can't forget them or make them stop happening. Not that I want to necessarily. It's gotten much less frequent. It's not like it really bothers me or anything, but it's such an inherent part of my daily existence. I will add, I was in a very severe car accident about 15 years ago. Pedestrian versus vehicle, and I had pretty severe head trauma amongst other bodily injuries. This incident hasn't left me with many lasting side effects other than vertigo, tinnitus, and some issues with mental focus. Something I and one or two very close people to me have noticed. just because we know how mentally sharp I was before. And I can recall the paranormal events with the same clarity as before the accident. So I don't believe that has had any impact on my memories of these happenings. A little background. I am 29 female, and I grew up in a crummy little town in Northern California where I spent ages 1 to 10 years old. My parents have been divorced since before I can remember. I have no memories of them together, so I grew up floating between the two households. I lived with my mom during the time when these events occurred and would see my dad every other weekend. I remember being very attached to my mom, as most small children tend to be, especially in split households, and I would typically end up sleeping in her bed most nights. I was probably 2 or 3 when my first stepdad came into the picture, and he of course wanted to put a stop to the bed sharing. He worked a pretty stressful job with long hours and didn't need a wiggly toddler messing with his sleep schedule. And as a parent now myself, I totally get it. I recall that I didn't take very well to it initially. I would wake up in the middle of the night to go to my mom's room, which was directly across the hall from mine, try the doorknob and find it locked. I would just sit there and knock until either my mom came and got me, or sometimes my stepdad would tell me to go back to my own room. At one point, my stepdad sat me down and had a conversation with me about how I needed to stay in bed unless it was an emergency. We all needed to get as much sleep as we could to stay healthy and have energy to go to work and school and play, etc. So I got the hint, and eventually I was able to stay asleep through the night. And I wanted to make sure no one got sick or tired because I was waking them up in the night. So even if I did wake up, I did everything I could to fall back to sleep and stay in bed. The house we lived in had always given me some bad vibes. Even at such a young age, I could just tell that there was something wrong with it. It felt heavy inside, and just about any time I turned a corner or entered a room, it felt like there was going to be someone or something waiting for me. Having our dog Zephyr had helped a bit. He was a Rhodesian Ridgeback. They are a larger breed, pretty muscular, very loyal, protective, and intelligent. He slept in my room, at the foot of my bed most of the time. The first encounter I experienced was when I was probably 4 to 5 years old, and at this point I had developed a solid sleeping pattern and rarely woke up throughout the night. I remember waking up, my whole body was just wide awake. I was completely alert out of a dead sleep. I looked at my digital clock on the nightstand and I saw it was 2:14 a.m. I have no clue why I remember that exact time with such clarity. I remember just about everything about the entire scene in vivid detail, as a matter of fact. And I just kind of looked around my room wondering why I had woken up. I looked towards the foot of my bed, which was facing my open bedroom door, where I could see the small hallway and across it to my mom's closed bedroom door. The hallway light was on, which was normal, but nothing amiss. I saw Zephyr at the foot of my bed and noticed his ears were perked, and he was alert as well as his head lifted and focused on the hallway, but still sitting down. I suddenly had a really overpowering sense of alarm come over me. My heartbeat sped up and my breathing got shallow. And I remember feeling like I needed to get out of there, out of my room, and at the very least, and not be alone. The sound was muffled at first, kind of like it was down the hallway and maybe coming from the garage, which was past the kitchen. It was a dragging sound, like something heavy wrapped in cloth being dragged across the floor. Then a heavy, dull thud, followed by a low moan as if someone were in pain. But it wasn't clear. It was like if someone had something covering their mouth. I sat there in bed, trying to understand what I was hearing, or if I was really hearing it. When I looked back at my dog, he stood up on my bed immediately, hackles raised and growling with teeth bared toward my open door. This dog was never vocal by any means, let alone aggressive, and his reaction proved to me that I was truly experiencing what I felt and heard. I sat for a few more seconds, just stunned, I think. And I couldn't hear the dragging, the thump, and the groan repeated. Now closer towards the end of the hallway, which means it had crossed through the kitchen. I threw my covers off and ran to the doorway, where I stopped, suddenly very frozen in fear. The noises continued, seemingly unbothered by my movement, and Zephyr had jumped down from my bed but refused to move from the part of the room. I remember my heartbeat suddenly pounding in my ears as I tried to figure out how to take the 3 steps across the hallway to get to my mom's room without getting caught, eaten, found by whatever was coming towards me. I heard one more muffled groan and decided to shut my eyes and just run. As I stepped into the hallway, I remember it was so cold, like a window had been left open, and it kind of caught my breath in my chest. I also remember having my entire body just flooded with a sense of, do not look down the hallway. And I listened to it. I opened one eye to make sure I didn't run into my mom's door. Thankfully, it was unlocked as I barreled into her room and closed it quickly and as quietly as I could behind me. I crawled into bed next to my mom and pulled the covers over my head, trying to calm myself down as best as I could. Eventually, I fell asleep and I didn't hear the noise anymore. I think it was about a week before I tried to tell anyone about that night. I think my mindset was, don't think about it or it will happen again. So I didn't really acknowledge it until I had some undivided attention from adults. It made me feel safer. It was my dad and his wife at the time who I ended up talking to about the whole thing. They brushed it off and suggested that it was a refrigerator or ice maker. But with how my dog reacted and how very clearly I could remember it all, especially the way it made me feel, I knew it was something else. 100% had the dog by my side every night for a very long time. I started keeping my door closed or open just a crack. But as far as I can remember, that particular incident never happened again. As I grew up in that house, I still felt like there was a presence, not necessarily malicious, but definitely nothing good. More like it wanted to keep me in a perpetual state of fear and anxiety. I continued to have that feeling of expecting to see something around each corner, which did give me horrible anxiety. In fact, I remember vividly one afternoon in my after-school program in the 1st grade. It felt like I was lucid dreaming, like suddenly nothing around me was real, and I couldn't wake up. I started crying and screaming and pinching my arms just to make sure I could feel it. And then another little kid went and got a teacher because he thought I had gotten stuck in the play structure I was in. Needless to say, whatever it was, it succeeded in messing with my head, if that was its goal. Over the next year, my dad ended up taking Zephyr to live on the ranch he had. Zephyr was his dog to begin with. I was never quite sure why he left him with my mom in the first place. And one night I remember not feeling well and wanting to go get my mom for some medicine. But when I opened the bedroom door, a large dark dog snout appeared out of the darkness, and then an entire canine muzzle protruded out towards me at eye level. It was a dark brown color, long and sleek, and I could even see the shine from the wetness of the nose. No teeth bared, no noises, or anything in particular scary other than in the indication that there was suddenly a very large dog in my mom's room. I very quietly closed the door and ran back to bed, hoping that that would be the end of it for the night. And it was. My younger sister was born when I was 6, and my brother when I was 8. So there were a lot of distractions over the next few years, and I didn't notice much activity. Things got really chaotic at that house. Unfortunately, it developed into a pretty toxic relationship between my mom, stepdad, and me. So when I was 10 years old, I decided to go live with my dad on his ranch. I continued to feel paranoid and anxious, but I didn't have any more encounters, like at my mom's house. Later in my teenage years, I confided in my mom about the feelings of a heavy presence and very vaguely touching on that one particular encounter, and she confessed that she had always felt a presence there as well. At that point, we weren't terribly close, so I didn't press her anymore on the issue, and she never brought it up again either. My next significant encounter didn't happen until I was in my early 20s. My daughter was around 2.5 at the time. I remember purchased my first home. And after a year of living there, my ex-husband and I split up and had settled on me keeping the house since he didn't like the area it was in anyways. It was kind of in the mountains, and he was very much a city-like person. I loved the place. The area was great with lots of hiking and lakes nearby. A great spot for a first home and plenty opportunities to get my daughter outside. The house was a 2-bedroom, 2-bath, and a nice little porch on the back, and plenty of room for my daughter to grow up into. There was something off about her room in particular, though, specifically her closet. It just made me want to not be in there for too long. Honestly, I would watch it through the video monitor I had in her room sometimes when my daughter was with her dad, and I truly half expected to see something come out of it. For eyes to peer back at me or a hand to reach around the sliding doors, but I just chalked it up to being single for the first time in almost 10 years and readjusting to being alone. And of course, my anxiety that has stuck with me since childhood. My daughter really only slept in her room. The rest of the time, I made sure to have her in the kitchen with me, playing in the living room or outside digging into the dirt, planting flowers, or something of the sort. Plus, nothing happened aside from the feeling of mine, and I tried really hard just to push it away and not let it get the better of me. One day I was cleaning up, dusting the vents, particularly when I saw a bunch of colorful things in the vents connected to the wood-burning fireplace. I unscrewed the vents and found a ton of Lego pieces, a spoon, and a few other small plastic toy parts. I thought to myself, well, safe to say there was definitely a little kid living here at one point, as I smiled and imagined a toddler happily pushing their toys into the vent on the wall, having the time of their life, and some poor mothering wondering where the spoon went. As I scooped out more of the Legos and other junk, I found a card at the very back of the pile that turned out to be a driver's license. I cleaned it off and saw the expiration date was still a couple years away, meaning it must have been renewed fairly recently, and I decided to look up the person to see if I could return it to them. It had been about a year of me owning the house, so I figured they most likely had gotten a replacement, but I was strangely curious about this person. I thought it was a little strange. The license belonged to a younger girl according to the birth date on the card, but she didn't have any social media, nothing on LinkedIn, really no internet presence at all, which I feel is pretty rare today. The only thing I could find connected to her was an old blog post. I think it was only a couple years old at the time, and she was kind of venting online about how her family had abandoned her, and they shunned her for practicing a certain belief system, and that is constantly misconstrued and sensationalized to be something that it's not. I don't want to name it here just because, based on what she said she was doing, the rituals and summoning. I don't believe she was following practices in line with this religion, and I don't feel right associating it here. I think she may have been confused herself. I will say I ended up shredding the license and never got in touch with her. Trigger warning, this next paragraph will be about pregnancy loss. She talked about her boyfriend she lived with and the child they had, and how they were very happy together and better off without her judgmental family. She went on to say that she had a miscarriage recently, decently late during pregnancy. Not sure if this was before or after she had the child that lived in the house with her. And she was very obviously grieving for a long time. In one post, she claimed to have summoned her lost child's spirit. I felt like this could have been connected to my strange feelings about my daughter's room, but I kind of felt like I was being paranoid, and once again, didn't want to let it get the best of me. I held on to this mindset until one night I woke up to my daughter crying. It was a little louder than her usual "I'm awake" cry, so I checked the video monitor I had on my phone. I saw her standing up holding onto the railing at the foot of her bed, looking just to the left of the monitor camera. She was crying and suddenly started screaming in a way that I had never heard before, with so much terror and fear. I watched for a second longer when she raised her arm and pointed at something, also just to the left of the monitor. I sprinted into her room, not even thinking to look at the wall near the monitor. I scooped her into my arms and asked desperately, "What's wrong? Are you okay? What is it?" She continued crying, and her arm, still raised pointing behind me, began raising up towards the ceiling, while her eyes followed, and she was able to say through tears, "That! Make it stop! That!" I followed her direction and looked up where she was focused, but saw nothing. The room was so heavy, though, and that closet, there was such a sinister energy to it with it. I took my daughter into my room, and she slept the rest of the night in my bed. The next day, I dropped her off with her dad for the weekend, and I immediately went and bought sage to burn. I had never done anything like that before, and tried to research as much as I could about how to be successful with it. So, I gave it my best shot. I took an abalone shell, burned the sage, and walked through my home speaking in projective, positive energy into my space and releasing any negative energies that may be stuck. I went to my daughter's room last, really wanting to take my time in there. My voice shrank a little, my hands shook a little, but I went on very intentionally. I wanted to really focus on that closet. I had to. As I continued speaking and moving closer to the closet, I pulled one of the sliding doors back so that I could get the sage inside that space. The words got stuck in my throat, and my breathing stopped involuntarily. On the back of that sliding door were several strange symbols, and things that looked like they might be words in a different language, and then what seemed like scribbles of nonsense. I immediately cleaned off the door as best as I could and as fast as I could, and finished up the rest of the saging of the room. I wish I had taken a picture or something, so I could have researched what they were. It could have also been nothing but nonsense, but I suppose it's for the best either way. After the saging, the house honestly did feel lighter, and nothing ever happened like that night again. My daughter slept much better, and my mood in general seemed to improve. I ended up selling the place a couple years ago and have since moved to a different state, and ever since then my life has been fairly uneventful in the paranormal area. I did seem to gain the sense of premonition almost. It started when I was around 10 to 11 and got progressively stronger with age. It's kind of cool, kind of useful, kind of a bummer sometimes. I get very clear thoughts, almost like it's spoken to me, but in my head, just like a very confidently stated fact. I can get into that in a different post, though. This has gone on for much, much longer than I anticipated. But it feels really good to be able to get out in a community where these kind of events are actually given credibility. Does anyone have any idea what could have been going on in my childhood house? I went back the first time in probably 10 plus years to get some old belongings. Mom still owns it. Younger brother sometimes stays in it, but otherwise it is unoccupied. And that heaviness is still very much there. I was told at one point that it was a drug house right before we moved in. And I tried Googling the address to see if there were any reports about deaths or any particular heinous occurrences that took place, but I can't find anything. Also, any thoughts on the event in my daughter's room? I have no clue if it was directly related to that girl and something she may have tried, or if it was something else completely unrelated. I'm open to any theories or educated guesses because I have none. Thank you so much for taking the time to read through all of this. I truly appreciate it. I rarely answer back to these, but I will say your childhood home, you might want to try saging it like you did your adult home that you lived in. Probably make a huge difference in the house. Your daughter's room, I feel like maybe that girl brought her child spirit back, but in the closet, and that's where the spirit was casted to and was held. Those markings inside the closet were probably sigils. They are a type of like spell and markings. People use them for protection or casting spells, and maybe that's how she held the her child spirit in the closet, was by those sigils. And after you marked it away and saged in there, it probably released the child spirit. And that's probably why you never had anything other, happen in the house again. So I feel like you did the right thing. I just feel like you're very sensitive to spirits. It seems like maybe you might be a medium or a psychic. I would consider a psychic because I've seen many ghosts and I've talked to many ghosts, throughout my life. And I think you are kind of like me. I wish you the best of life. Those are my thoughts about it. I don't know if that helped at all. It's just some of my experiences and some things I have learned throughout the years. But I hope y'all enjoyed this story. If y'all have any advice for her, you can always leave it down below. She will be reading, so be nice. I love y'all so much. I will see y'all on Saturday for Creepypasta Day. But until then, remember it's scary out there. Please like and subscribe. Howdy, y'all. It's Curious Raven. I hope everyone has been doing good. Today we have a mix of weird, scary paranormal stories. Number 1, I feel extremely confused still, honestly. It was 2017, so quite a few years ago at this point, but I still to this day cannot wrap my head around it. I was about 11, maybe 12 at the time, 19 now. It was around 7:40 a.m. and the sun was out and shining bright on a weekday. My mom and I were driving to school when just a minute past my house, we were coming up to the railroad tracks, which we did every day, except this morning we saw a man walking. I thought nothing of it, except it was odd that he was wearing all black jeans, black zip-up hoodie, black shoes. It was bent over, seemingly, when we were just starting to see the figure, and then it stood up, and I think it had its hands in its pockets. He was walking on the left side of the road, off onto some grass, with his hoodie up over his head. It began to walk. As we got close, it whipped its head around and looked at us. I expected to see a guy's face, but I saw nothing but pure blackness, darkness, a shadow where a face should be. I was staring in disbelief. The thing seemed to be scared, oddly, and began running. I have no idea why. Even then, I was so confused. It ran for a few seconds, which seemed like a while to be seeing what I was seeing. Then it slid down into the grass onto its butt and leaned onto its right side and hopped off like it was on a ledge. Mom kept driving slowly, and we watched the figure disappear into the ground. We both stared at the place where it went, and it was just gone. A second later, as we finally began to go over the tracks, I uttered, "Mom?" She looked over at me and just said, "I don't know." And I asked if she saw it, and she said, "Yes, yeah, I saw it." And we both just sat there, I guess just thinking. In this experience, I didn't feel threatened. I didn't feel like it was planning on harming us, but it was so confusing. Why did it have no face? Why did it run? Why did it act like we weren't supposed to be able to see it either? Why did it go into the ground? Why was it wearing such stereotypical stock robber, scary man clothes? Does it mean hell is real? Did it go there? Was it a demon? I've never been a believer in the paranormal. I've always rejected the idea of God or religion in general, and I still can't get into that. As time went, kind of ignored this memory. Kind of ignored it and how it affected me. I now recently have been thinking about it and cannot wrap my head around it. I know I'm not crazy because my mom saw it too and can describe it the same as me. I just can't comprehend how it was real as any other person walking the street. I don't know why I'm posting this. Relate to about this, I guess. I've been feeling emotional about it lately. Is there anyone out there who can maybe help me understand this? Anyone else experience a similar thing? I've been to the spot multiple times since and never saw anything. I haven't seen anything paranormal since, in fact. Thank you for reading if you got this far. Means a lot. I just feel so alone and confused in the experience and sometimes life in general. I don't know how to process there being other things. Number 2, this story begins during spring break of 2023, and still to this day it remains as the most terrified I have ever been in my life. I was sleeping, unmoved as I always laid. My dreams was weird, as all dreams are. I remember seeing racetracks, not like regular racetracks, but like Hot Wheel tracks scaled to the size for humans. But that's beside the point. At any rate, at point in my dream, I see a crowd of people watching the cars go by. As I get closer, this crowd in my dream, I notice they are my family. So I started greeting them as I would in reality. My grandfather was among the crowd, and in the dream he turns around and shakes my hand. Finally he shouted, but still in a calm demeanor over the racing cars. "Oh hey, I just wanted to let you know there's a man in your closet staring at you." I didn't even react in the dream. I just sprung to life and immediately turned away from my closet door. My closet is a walk-in closet, and which directly leads into the bathroom. I remember my heart beating and traveling so fast I felt like was really someone there? But could have heard it. I was trying to conceal my breathing as to make it look like I was still sleeping. But I'm sure this figure would have already have seen me jolt into a different position. I laid in silence. Every noise of the house settling, I only thought the worse. Person is getting closer. This figure is going to appear before me on my side of the bed. I'm going to die. With all of these mixed emotions and scenarios going through my head, I wondered how long I had actually been awake. I could see my window in the corner of my eye, and the sun was slowly rising. Finally, I had the courage to peek my head slightly up to see the time. 5:55. I must have been there for an hour, I figured. It felt extremely long. I remember when I was trying to calm myself down and think rationally, I knew I could have heard at least someone leave through my bedroom door, which was closed, or my bathroom door, which also I leave closed. I was facing towards the window. There's no way this supposed man staring at me could have escaped. Finally, after a minute or two, I sat up in bed, staring directly at my closet. After a few seconds, my eyes adjusted to the dark, and I didn't see anything. I turned on my bedside lamp, began to walk towards the closet. I flicked on the closet light, and no one was in there. I walked through the closet into the bathroom. No one was hiding in there. No man was staring at me, at least physically. Later on, I was trying to research why this could have happened, especially so abruptly. This occurrence never happened again, even as I live now. I thought, however, that maybe it was something paranormal. I've always been wary of those kinds of things, though. I don't want to tempt some unknown spirit somehow, but maybe I have. As in my room, I have an extensive military collection with relics spanning back all the way to World War I. So maybe, just maybe, my brain subconsciously knew that someone or some entity attached to one of the objects I own was watching me. I own military uniforms in my closet, so maybe this was their way to say I am here. You have my stuff. Thanks for preserving it. Or maybe they're watching me and saying I'm here. You have my stuff, and I want you. Number 3. So I dreamed I decided to visit an uncle of mine who's a Freemason, and I haven't seen for a long time. In this dream, I called him on the phone to ask if I could go over to visit, and he said it was okay. Then he said if I still wanted to be a Freemason, and I said I did. Later in the dream, I'm going up the stairs to his house, when suddenly it all went pitch black. A voice said, "Do you seek the light?" And I answered yes. Then it asked the same question again 2 more times, and I answered yes to all of them. So a door opened to a room, which was not my uncle's house, and he was not there. I saw a group of men, all unknown to me, wearing matching robes. They tested me and asked a few questions concerning responsibility, commitment, life goals, and ethics. I felt a little scared, and in a moment of consciousness inside a dream, I said, If you mean to cause any evil or harm to my family, I hereby demand you all to leave, by the name and the blood of my Lord Jesus Christ." One of them smiled at me and said, "We mean no harm to no one, and you are a wise in spirit, for you know that evil things run fear if one says the name Jesus." Then an old man with a long white beard appeared, sitting on a chair, with the door behind him. He asked, "Who are you?" I said my name, and he said, "This is your name. Who are you?" I said I was a servant of Jesus Christ, in search of becoming better, and he said, "That is your commitment, your mission. Who are you?" I said I am, and I spent a few seconds thinking, and the old man interrupted me, saying, "Indeed you are. I welcome you. You may go through." And I went through the door and woke up. It was vivid as fuck, and that's why I can recall most of what happened and what was said. Any ideas of what might have happened, or if it was just a weird dream? Number 4. I was on the bus during the late hours of evening, and it was only me sitting on the bus. This happened very recently, so the story is still clear in my mind. Nothing was special or had stuck out to me about the trip until after a few stops. This man got on the bus and decided to sit next to me. I felt quite confused, as there were many seats around me that he could have chosen elsewhere to sit. I was also sitting near the back, so he seemed to have examined the entire bus and still chose to sit right by me. Just wonderful. I ignored it and kept to myself, until he turned his face to me and asked me if I could keep a secret. This petrified me, as I thought he was about to confess something awful to me, as if I were a priest. He did stand out a little, so I assumed he was unwell or maybe even homeless. I stared at him for a few moments before ignoring him, not knowing how to respond. I'm not a rude person, but I am neurodivergent. It doesn't affect me much aside from my social skills, so sometimes I freeze and I'm unable to respond if the person seems even slightly threatening. He kept pestering me and asked me again if I could keep a secret. I stared at him and tried hard to convey fear with my eyes, to try and imply that I was uncomfortable and maybe not the best person to share whatever he had to say to. I don't suffer from anxiety, so that's not the case. I simply don't communicate well. So after he asked me a few more times, I just said, "Yes." He smiled and pulled out something from his jacket, and my first thought was that it was shiny and square. Then he held it close to his lap, sort of secretively, even though there was nobody around. I understood this was some older, troubled man, so I tried to be polite until he pulled out a photograph of a man wearing the outfit that I have seen local officers wear. He was laying face first in the ground and was lying in what I assumed to be his own blood. And my heart sank, and I looked up at the man again, and now he had stopped smiling, which made me even more confused and scared. He told me that he wasn't from this time, and he had successfully built a time machine and had wound up here, but there were government officials trying to stop him. I kept listening when I faced him as he continued to speak. I tried to comprehend what he was saying, but there was a ringing in my ear that just kept getting louder and louder, and all I could focus on was his mouth moving, but not the actual words coming out of it, until I realized he just wasn't there anymore, and the ringing noise had suddenly stopped. I didn't even see him vanish. He was just gone. The seat next to me was just empty. I didn't see him get up, and the bus hadn't stopped in at least a few minutes before neither of us rang the stop button. I looked around and had noticed it was earlier in the day all of a sudden. The sky was lighter, colorful than when I got on, And then I checked my phone and it was 2 hours before the time I was even supposed to get on the bus. Also, the surrounding outside didn't seem familiar at all. I've taken this bus route 100 times, and I've practically memorized every tree, building, and road at this point. I checked Google Maps, and I was several hours away from home, when my typical bus ride itself is no longer than 40 minutes. I pressed the stop button and tried to explain to the bus driver that I think that I took the wrong bus, and he explained that I have to take the same bus back and then catch 2 more buses if I wished to go back to the place where I had even got on the bus originally. That made no sense. I have a very good memory and I am constantly aware of what I'm doing. If I had changed the bus 3 times, I would have known. Also, I only bought 1 bus ticket. I do drink sometimes, but that is only occasionally. I have never taken recreational drugs, and I haven't been on a prescribed medication since I was a child. Before you ask, I tried to post this on the Glitch subreddit, but it didn't have enough karma. I originally created this account to share this story, and decided this subreddit might be the second best place to share. Thank you. Number 5. I saw this dark shadow figure in the woods. It was all black like a shadow, but I could tell it wasn't just a shadow. It was almost solid. It was tall and had the figure of a man, and it was followed directly with the most unsettling feeling I have ever gotten. I was driving to school, so my headlights hit him, and then he was gone. Nothing was there. Fast forward a couple days. I hadn't thought about it much, but my mood had dropped severely over the week. I'm usually a total optimist and always have so much energy, and I didn't know why. I was always upset and tired all the time. Then I was in the public bathroom, but nobody was in there but me. I'm sitting in the stall when the sink suddenly turns on. It was one of those motion-censored sinks. I was still the only one in the bathroom, and I was in the stall though. The second I opened the stall door to check, it stopped. I texted my friends, who knows a lot about ghosts, and told her I thought I was being haunted, and she said I might have an attachment. Without telling her about my mood dropping, she says, it can cause mood to drop and for somebody to get tired. It's all connecting, and I'm not sure what to do. Number 6. We went home after going to a funeral of my aunt. That very night, only after a few minutes of sleeping, I had a nightmare, wherein I was held down on both of my hands and feet by tiny black shadows. By a black shadow. It only went away when my mother turned on the lights. According to my mother, I was frantically kicking my feet, moving my hands, and I was screaming. After going out of the room, we found out that one of the statues of the saints we have has been broken to pieces from falling from the cabinet. How do we make the spirit go away? I'm so scared to sleep at night because of this, and I'm only able to sleep after the sun's out. This all happened last Saturday night. Nothing happened ever since, but I just want to make sure if the spirit is still here or not. Please help for those with similar experiences. Number 7. My mother at the time was about 20 years old. She was near a garden with my dad and her friends, then said that her friend had called out for her. My mother then went to see what was going on. When she saw her friend with the same face and everything wearing a red dress, she said that she had seen all red, and then her friend disappeared. My mom started screaming, and my dad then took her home. So, she had spent 3 months sleeping in my parents' bed because she was terrified. My mother is 40 now and has not seen the ghost since. Was it her imagination? Has something like this ever happened? There aren't any stories of Ghost Lady wearing a red dress in my country anywhere. And I am very curious as to what this might have been. Alrighty, y'all. I hope y'all enjoyed that collection. I love y'all so much. I will see y'all for Creepypasta Saturday. But until then, remember it's scary out there. Please like and subscribe. Howdy, y'all. It's Curious Raven. How are y'all doing this week? It is Tuesday today. I hope everyone's doing okay. But I hope everyone has a great week. We have some haunted building / house stories today. I hope y'all enjoy. Number 1. Used to be a believer when I was a kid. I've debunked every event and encounter except one. Still can't explain how this happened. Family road vacation during the summer of 1978 or 79. I was about 10. My mom and dad drove us kids everywhere. This event happened in Virginia City, Nevada. We had a great time touring the town and shops. I was thrilled by the Western-style shootout on Main Street. The loser had squibs in his torso that exploded blood, and he fell near my feet. I was surprised, then proud to have a drop of fake blood on my shirt. It was a 10-year-old boy's idea of an awesome day. My dad took me and my younger sister to the cemetery. I think we were killing time while my mom took my younger brother to the restroom. We stayed very close to my dad. Cemeteries were spooky to us kids then. I was doing the math on the dates listed to determine the age of death. Soon I became further spooked by all of the kids and babies in this place. The event happened at one large family plot. I was looking at the headstones of the kids when I suddenly fell forward onto the grave without warning or intent. My dad yelled at me to stay off the graves. He'd already warned us it was taboo. I still can't explain how or why I fell. My sister still remembers because it scared her. She said I simply fell forward as if I fell asleep, except she could see I was still awake. I don't recall tripping, losing balance, fainting, feeling a force or a push or a pull. I didn't lose time. I just simply fell, completely conscious, onto the grave of the dead kids. It scared the shit out of me. And that's it. I still don't know what happened. I haven't debunked my sister's belief it was paranormal. Well, I no longer believe in the paranormal. I don't have an explanation yet. I hope you enjoyed my retelling. The next story is from Paranormal Sciences. They are a paranormal research group, and y'all should go check them out. I'll leave their link down below. Earlier in this year, a teammate and I went to Comic-Con. It was held at Shriners Temple, and we were representing the Ghost Hunters cosplay chapter in the area. Needless to say, later in the con, we met the PR of the Shriners in the area where I live. We got to talking, and he was thrilled to let us investigate the temple because it was known to have activity throughout the organization. We set the date up and time, and eventually we met with PJPR. He showed us around the building of all the hot spots. We did our baselines with my tri-field meter. I'm not exaggerating when I say this was one of the most active locations I have ever investigated in my 20-plus years of paranormal investigations. We have objects flying off the shelves captured by video. Best part of the night was we actually had an SLS camera. The PR for the Shriners was with me, and we were in the left side of this huge auditorium. And my teammate was with another person that was with us. They heard audible, disembodied music coming from the stage area. Meanwhile, the PR of the Shriners and I were watching stick figures from the SLS camera literally dancing. That was some of the most fun activity I have ever captured on film. During the audio review, we captured the audio that was playing in the auditorium. We captured the candy bars that the Shriners sell flying off shelves. It was one of the most insane stuff we've ever recorded. Now, the Shriners are allowing my partner and I access to report hauntings in the area where we live. No, I'm not a Shriner or a Mason. We're just lucky to be part of this awesome experience. Number 3. I have felt an unsettling feeling in my bowels a few times, including apparitions and whispered voices in my life. Before I read somewhere decades ago that if you tell a spirit you are dead, you can now move on, out loud 3 times, they will depart. Since then, I've encountered 3 spirits at my respective workplaces and decided to test the theory, if you will, and I have never felt them again. The most recent, just a month or so ago, I allowed the spirit to inform me of their demise, and they sent a very sharp pain to my scalp and somehow knew it was the head of an axe. I'm still skeptical enough that I let this go on for a few days, and I told them twice they are dead and they can move on now. The sharp pain in my head intensified when I was near their area. I was telling my coworker about this. I've talked about these things with him before, and he doesn't think I'm crazy, or at least he indulges my musings. Out in the parking lot after shift, joking that I already told the spirit they are dead, but only twice. And he was like, "Oh man, you can't leave them hanging like that." So I look over to the area where the spirit lingered, and I almost casually said, "Okay, fine. You're dead. You can move on now." And I felt the most intense chill run from my core but through my scalp and suddenly release my energy. And I do not sense the presence of the ghost anymore. He was a very sweet old man that just didn't want the power lines coming through his property back around the turn of the last century, and somebody, maybe even himself by accident, split his head wide open with the axe that he had in his hands. It seems to me that he tried to chop down the power line and electrocuted himself, and the axe came back upon his skull by the surge. I don't watch many of the ghost shows on TV, but it seems most solutions include commanding them to leave or telling them they're not welcome anymore. I don't remember hearing of anybody simply telling these trapped souls that they were actually dead. It makes me think that the poltergeist type of activities are souls that are really mad that they can't interact physically with us. I have another theory about all these souls being trapped by early electricity technology before wires were insulated. That is a discussion for another time. Number 4. So, this past weekend, my fiance Joey, male 39, and I, female 40 tomorrow, were at Echo Lodge, motel brand name changed, celebrating my birthday early since we both finally had the weekend off and we desperately needed to spend some quality time with each other. Friday, late afternoon, we're in our room, number 263. This is important because there are only 2 floors, and we were at the end of the hallway. So not many guests on our end, which was nice because it was quiet for the most part. Joey and I were watching TV when we heard what sounded like a very heavy footsteps above us, followed by the sound of a small cast iron cannonball being dropped directly above where our heads were. That in itself was terrifying because seriously, what the fuck? Later on, Joey and I are sitting in bed, my back facing him, when all of a sudden Joey goes, "Whoa, what the fuck?" I looked up at him and asked what happened, and he told me that he had just seen a massive white orb float from the bed to the ceiling right between us. I was like, what? And then I realized that for the last 15 minutes, it had been very cold between us, temperature-wise. Saturday night, again, Joey and I are sitting on the bed, just cuddling and watching TV, when out of nowhere I hear a woman's voice in my ear loudly whisper, "Oh." I jumped and screamed and asked Joey, "Did you hear that?" And he said he hadn't heard anything. Half an hour goes by and all of a sudden I feel a very cold hand touch my upper thigh. I screamed louder than I had before and jumped off the bed. Joey was panicking and asking me what happened, and I told him that someone just touched me. I was for sure freaked out now. We had to go outside for a full half hour just for me to calm down. Well, we left the motel at 10 in the morning. Ever since Saturday night, I haven't stopped hearing whispering, my ear being whispered or hey being whispered in my ear. I am really freaked out. I'm in North Carolina if that helps. I need any kind of help in finding a reliable ghost hunter group, or even a good medium might help. I don't know anymore. Someone please help me. Number 5. I'm an RN, and I work for our float pool, traveling nurses within the same system. I was floated to the closed, sometimes opened, old locked psych unit that is occasionally used for overflow patients and staff by float pool when needed. Working night shift, I had a patient ask during night med pass if I could ask housekeeping to not empty her trash in the middle of the night as it woke her up the night before. I thought, weird, but okay. I called housekeeping, and they said they don't have anyone cleaning on nights on the overflow unit. This patient was fully oriented, walking, talking, not weird at all. Not a sundowner in any way whatsoever. 3 a.m. rolls around, and the patient rings her call bell. As I'm walking down the hallway to her room, the double doors, locked requires a badge swipe, close. I answered her bell, and she is mad. She asked for housekeeping not to come in, and they did. She said they emptied her trash, and she heard the can open and the trash bag rustle. I profusely apologized and insisted it won't happen again. I called housekeeping, who again stated they don't have someone covering our floor at night because it's just an overflow unit. So I called security since the doors are badged access only. We pulled the badge swipe logs from the doors, and no one had access to doors after the kitchen staff picked up the dirty trays at 9 p.m. We pull footage of the hallway corridor and can clearly see one of the doors open halfway, close, and not a single person in sight. We still have no explanation to this day, and it's just well known that the 11th floor is haunted. Apparently, it was making the psych patients go crazier. So they moved the unit to a new wing of the hospital and only use this floor now for short-term overflow. Number 6. This is a true story. It happened a long time ago when I was a child. My mother and her friends liked to visit places believed to be haunted. After ghost hunting one night, she told me that she was afraid she brought something home, something evil. She told me she could feel an evil presence in the house and could hear whispering. I didn't hear anything, so I just thought she was imagining it. I heard screaming that night and was frozen in my bed with fear. After the screaming stopped, I waited a while and then went downstairs to see what happened. My mother was sitting on the sofa shaking, and she told me that she woke up because she heard a baby crying. She said she followed the sound through the house and down into the basement. When she got down into the basement, the baby stopped crying and a woman started screaming. She frantically looked around for the woman but couldn't find her. She looked out the basement window to see if the woman was outside. That's when she seen her reflection and realized she was the woman screaming. She turned around and started running back up the basement steps, and she could hear a baby giggling. After that, I started hearing the whispering and someone walking around the house late at night. There was a foul odor and a chill that seemed to move from room to room. My mother believed that she was possessed sometimes because she would find herself standing in the yard or basement with no memory how she got there. This went on for years. We tried having the house blessed to get rid of it, but nothing worked. Finally, we moved hoping it would follow, and it didn't. Whatever it was stayed at the house. Every now and then again, I think about stopping at the house and asking the people that live there now if there are any strange things going on. But how do you ask someone something like that without seeming crazy? Number 7. I'm 19 years old, and I wanted to open up about what happened to me. I don't have any photo or video evidence as I was around 7 to 8 years old. However, I used to live in a rusty console house when I was young and used to be scared of the stairs and refused to go upstairs without my mom or dad. One time, my cousin, same age as me, came around to play with me, and we both decided to go upstairs during the day to play in my room. When we got there, we were about to go up the stairs until we saw an actual figure or something staring down with their hair covered. We both screamed and cried and ran to my parents saying there was someone in the house. My parents checked everywhere in the house. Windows are shut, doors were locked, and they said no one was in the house. I know my neighborhood was bad, but not ever did anyone break into someone's house. And it is impossible for someone to be there as everything was shut and the house was small. The eerie thing is that the thing me and my cousin saw didn't look right. We had a bad feeling that what we encountered was a ghost. After that happened, I couldn't sleep alone, so I had to sleep in my parents' room and had a nightlight. We moved away after a few years, so I'm glad that's over. I still think about it to this day and struggle to sleep alone at times. Is there genuinely anyone who has experienced this? That is the end of today's stories. I hope y'all enjoyed them. Y'all have a good next couple of days. I will see y'all on Thursday for more true ghostly tales. I love y'all so much. And remember, it's scary out there. Please like and subscribe. Howdy, y'all. It's Curious Raven. It is Tuesday. Today is kind of a mix of some paranormal spookies, and I hope y'all enjoy them. Number 1. Hey, so I've always had sleep paralysis. Sometimes it's terrifying, but sometimes it's transcendental in the most beautiful way. I want to just explain 3 experiences that I have stuck with me and will forever be in my psyche. This one was the scariest one. I woke up from my sleep and I was completely paralyzed. I could only look at what was above me as I was laying in bed, unable to move or breathe. What I saw was to this day the most horrifying graphic image that nothing in life could top. It was a hairless, naked man covered in blood from head to toe, and he was shaking violently as if he was convulsing, with white foam coming out of his mouth. He had completely black eyes and looking right into my soul. I felt my body starting to levitate out of my bed towards him. He was pulling me towards him so he could devour me, and I was absolutely helpless. As I kept levitating closer to him, I myself started shaking, and I felt as if I was being possessed by a demon. With the little strength that I had, I looked over to the side of the bed and saw a very clean man dressed in a white robe, and he just said, "Remember that you are love." As soon as he said those words, I looked back up at this demon and I started reciting those words. "I am love. I am love." And slowly this demonic entity started to decompose and disappear right in front of me. As soon as he was gone, I could start moving my body again, and holy shit, I've never been so scared in my life. This one was such a beautiful experience. So I remember that I was in a state where I knew I was awake, but my eyes were shut, and I couldn't move my body. My body was asleep, but I was very much aware, and my visuals were going wild. I was in some kind of space shuttle made of glass, and I could see Earth below me. I remember looking to my left and right, and I could see so many people in this space shuttle also looking down at Earth. I recognized some of the people. Some were family, other friends, other were strangers. Anyways, there was a red light that was turned on, and we were waiting for the light to turn green so we could jump out of this space shuttle down to Earth. I remember when it turned green, my sister turns to me and says, "Are you ready? It's going to be a good life." And we jumped down to Earth to live our lives. This was a wild experience to me because it was so vivid and it felt so profound as if it really did happen. I always think about that and how we could be souls that just jump into Earth to experience life. Now, this last one was interesting because I felt that I had been visited by an ancestor. This time I was asleep, but I was aware in my dream. And I know when I get sleep paralysis, I get goosebumps and I have that feeling of dying almost. It's creepy, but you get used to it. Anyways, I'm looking at myself in the mirror, and I'm in my 50s to 60s. I'm currently in my late 20s, and it's the first time I have vividly seen myself at a much older age. I had lots of gray hair, but I looked damn good, not gonna lie. And behind me, I see old family members, all whom have passed, and they're just looking at me and smiling and making me feel very comforted. And one of them, who I believe was an ancestor from the 17th century, by what he was wearing tells me, "We get to live through you. You are us and we are you." And as soon as he said that, my eyes opened and I literally sat up on my bed and was freaked out. But also it felt so familiar. One thing I love about sleep paralysis is that when it's a good experience, there's a sense of being home. It's hard to explain. In life, I never quite have that exact feeling. The sigh of relief and feeling, yeah, I'm home now and it's forever. Would love to hear some of your experiences and what you guys have learned from them. Number 2. So, I'm not sure if this is really qualifies as paranormal, but I guess we will see what everyone thinks if anyone reads it. So I, 31 female, I've always had weird experiences with ESP. A lot of times in the form of dreams, either about past or future, turn out to come true. They're not usually happy things. So when I had this one, I kind of wondered, since it was happy-ish for me, and since that never happens, I didn't think it was one of the usual dreams. I had a sudden windfall in the dream, and due to someone finding out and telling everyone, my entire small town knew and I was being harassed, and as well as stalked by one person in particular. At some point in the dream, after he's followed me to a new city, I discover that my stalker is in fact a man I once had a bizarre toxic friendship/relationship with about 8 or so years ago. The reason came out that he had a mental health crisis a few years after his girlfriend died in a car crash. Well, it took a lot of Googling. I discovered while awake that his girlfriend had in fact died several years earlier. We have been an NC for many years. don't have friends in common, not on each other's social media accounts, etc. So there was no way I could have found out and forgotten his girlfriend died. I didn't know her last name and I couldn't confirm the cause. Despite the way we ended things, I was heartbroken from him. I forgot about it for about a year until last night. I had the dream once again, and on a whim Googled my ex's name, and amongst the random, I found her name. Then with quite a bit of more fingling, I found out that she did die in a car crash. It was in another state from me, not close at all, and I don't watch the news regularly. So again, I don't believe I heard about it and forgot and internalized it. Officially weirded out by that, hoping the setting windfall turns out to be true. I would have much rather it only be that part and not someone being dead. I didn't predict it or anything, like where I could have tried to stop it. I first had the dream in summer of 2022, and she died 2 years before that. I have never met her, but sounds like she was an amazing person, so I wish I had. Anyways, just needed someone to tell this to. My friends all think that I'm nuts, so better to be anonymous. Anyone else out here had experiences like this? Number 3. Hi everyone. I don't know if this is the right subreddit. Sorry if it's not. I, female 30, start by saying that I always had lucid dreams and nightmares since when I was a little kid. Same with sleep paralysis. Pretty scary if you're a little kid. In the last year, I have had weird reoccurring dreams that end up in the same way. In this dream, I'm just the audience. There is always this evil presence in the form of a person or something else. I follow them around. They are repeating a chanting in a language that I have never heard of. And I feel their evil intentions until at some point they turn to me screaming, "What are you doing here? You're not supposed to be here." And they come to attack me. I instantly wake up. And I always wake up at 3 a.m. After these dreams, I always feel extremely sick and ill. Today, I've had to call in sick for work because I was a literal wreck. I know dreams come from our subconscious, but these ones in particular are making me feel very uneasy. Anyone had a similar experience? Am I damned or something? Number 4. Hey y'all, this is a true story, and something my family is going through right now, and I'm not sure what to do about it. Please give me some suggestions. A few months ago, one of my mom's neighbor's chickens started coming into her yard to hang out. At first, they liked the chicken because why not? A free chicken. Duh. But anyways, there was an instance when the chicken had become aggressive towards my mom's boyfriend and tried to peck him, so he threw it over the fence back into the neighbor's yard, but it came back the next day. The trouble began very recently. My mother's dog attacked and severely wounded the chickens. My mom panicked and called a friend who then mercy killed the chickens in their bathroom. Since that happened, strange things have been happening, and I could tell you their mood had been not the best, and they have told me that their animals started acting different. I went to the house and prayed to God to have any negative energy removed from the house. When I got home, I had a fresh cut on my index finger. Oddly enough, it looked like a chicken pecked my finger. Later, after noticing that my brother called me, he and his girlfriend had been taking care of the animals while my mom and her boyfriend were out of town. He explained to me that he was putting his kid's car seat in, and while he was gone, his girlfriend heard him talking to the dog that attacked the chicken. I think something very bad is in that house. How should I get rid of it? Number 5. So, I'm not sure if this is the right place to ask this, but I've been looking into all sorts of things like experiences with mimics, doppelgangers, spirits, malevolent or not, and not sure where to look for answers. I have the mindset that you are respectful and don't have any fear of negative energy. Can you befriend them in any way? For example, I saw a video with a large shadow figure peeking from the end of the hallway before returning after being startled. And I understand people's natural reaction is to cleanse, expel, whatever it may be from the house. Make sure it isn't welcome. But I'd rather be kind than get rid of it. Treat them like a roommates or pets. I'd appreciate any answers, opinions, or experiences. I apologize if this is difficult to understand. Number 6. I have a lot of ghost stories to tell about my childhood home, but I'm going to dive into one. Just a little background. My house was built in 1880 and has lots of history around it. In every room, there's a doorbell right near the entryway. It's all connected to the device in the kitchen that would buzz and say which room it was coming from. When I was a kid, the doorbell still worked in every room, and you could hear it around the house. We knew it was for the servants that used to work in the house over 100 years ago. My house also had 2 staircases, one main staircase and one that connected right to the kitchen, which is off of my room. I often hear people going up and down the staircase with no one when no one is there, and voices. We have a big family, and my sister and I used to share a room at night on the 2nd floor. We had twin beds that were parallel to each other. In this story, I was probably around 8 and my sister was 7. One night I woke up and I was thirsty. I could feel how dry my throat was. All I wanted was my mom to come in and give me a glass of water. All of a sudden, I see my door lightly opened and a woman dressed in traditional servant's clothing, the black dress, white apron, and hat, with a blue hood, glides over to my bed and is holding a silver platter with a silver teacup and kettle on it. I remember trying to grab it and then lightly falling back to sleep. I wasn't scared or nervous. I was very calm. The next day, I wake up thinking it was some crazy dream. So naturally, I wanted to tell my sister, who I thought was sleeping right next to me at that time. Before I even begin telling my story, she tells me that she saw a blue woman next to her bed, handing me a silver platter. I couldn't even speak, I was so shocked. Our stories lined up almost exactly. To this day, we both remember what we saw and can tell almost the exact same story. Number 7. The experience I'm about to tell all of you may be reading is completely true. Believe that if you will. About 3 years ago, I went for a drive around the area I'd recently moved to, Winchester in the UK. And I was bored, and I just purchased a nice Alfa Romeo Hatch 147 Lusso edition, so I suppose I wanted an excuse to go for a drive and push the engine a bit. Plus, I wanted to explore the local area a little bit. Anyway, I ended up outside the city in the middle of nowhere. Country roads that are kind of like one-way roads in size, with high edges on the sides or tree-lined with a very, very occasional country cottage. So I'm driving. Not too fast. Alphas have good engines, and it's easy to go fast. But also I'm aware that I don't know where I am and therefore the turns and lay of the roads. So I had my high beams on to ensure I could see as well as possible. Anyways, as I'm pressing on, I noticed I was approaching a cottage coming up on my left when out of nowhere a very tall, I'd say 6.5, maybe taller male. It was definitely a male, ran out in front of my car near the house across the road. and then disappeared into a tree line, and I assumed some fields on my right. In my head, and also my instincts told me that this wasn't human. It was humanoid in shape, but it didn't have any hair on its body or head, which, fair enough, he might have just been bald, etc. But it was the speed it moved, and also the fact that it was a bloke totally naked in the middle of nowhere, run from near home in front of an oncoming car with brights on. So, if it was a bloke, up to no good, let's just say, he would wait till I passed and then continued on his way. Anyways, these thoughts passed through my head, and in a second, and before I knew it, my heart was pounding. And I just put my foot down, shifted a gear, and got out of the area as fast as I could. Although I did look out of my right window to see if I could see him. I couldn't, and before that briefly at the house, like I said, I got out of there rapid and didn't stop until I found an area I could pull over and gather my thoughts. I couldn't believe what I just seen. I knew in my heart of hearts and logically that it wasn't a man or a mad one or up to no good nor or whatever. Not only did it not make sense, it just wasn't. Its movements and speed, and again, why would a man do that? So my heart's going, I'm trying to make sense of it, and boom on my window. And it's a local Karen asking me to move on. What are you doing? We don't like all this around here, she said. Any other day or night, whatever, I would have asked what I'd done wrong. After all, I was only parked up gathering my thoughts, no music, pumping loudly, etc. Looking back, this just added to the strangeness of this previous event, as I was only about 5-minute drive away from that house I'd seen and the man appear from. Not from the actual house, I don't think, but near it. On that side of the road, plus, she said, round here. It was only a few cottages and a building that looked like a barn. So I moved on. When home, I pondered it till the early hours of the morning. Honestly, it was the strangest thing I've ever seen. I've told the odd person and they would laugh. Trust me, if you was there, you'd understand what I'm trying to tell you. Was it a cryptid? An alien? A demon? Or a naked man running around in front of cars from hedgerow to tree line and disappearing as fast as a click of your fingers? Anyway, that's me. That last story was really cool. I like that. And I think you saw something that was not human, by the way. I hope everyone is having a great week so far. I love y'all so much. I will see y'all Thursday. But until then, remember it's scary out there. Please like and subscribe. Howdy y'all, it's Curious Raven. It is Thursday, and we have a mixed bunch of ghost stories today. I hope y'all enjoy. Number 1. After a few minutes of watching a video on my TV while I was laying on my bed covered up, a necklace that was on my lampshade that had already knocked loose and then fell and hit my feet. So I, of course, tried to explain it away by hitting it loose, and yet it just hit the ground. So I knew something had to have enough energy to not only pick up a small but pretty heavy chain necklace and throw it at my feet. So while I was talking to my sister about it on the phone, my phone kept glitching out on camera mode in my hands. And keep in mind, you have to hold it for a few minutes because it was on a lock screen. Anyways, it did this like once, maybe 3 times. I can't remember. Finally stopped when I said, "Sorry, Grandpa, that I didn't take a picture of your grave when I did Grandma." After that, I just went to bed and haven't heard from them since then. So question here for you people is, was that my dead grandfather or something else? Number 2. So I moved into this house with a couple of guys. One guy owned the house and was renting some rooms to help with his mortgage. I remember asking him if he knew what happened to the previous owner. He asked why, and I said it just feels like that type of house with history. Fast forward about 4 to 6 months. My girlfriend is taking a nap in my room and I'm watching television. Clear as day I hear her call my name. Not once, but a couple of times. I get up and go to the room and basically wake her up, asking what she wants. My girlfriend is mad as hell that I woke her up and swear she didn't call my name. Maybe she was talking in her sleep. No, check this out. I told this story to my roommates and everyone thinks I'm crazy. About 2 weeks later, my roommate, 2 dudes are watching TV. One of my roommate's girlfriend is watching TV in his room on the opposite side of the house. She comes out to the living room and asks us what we wanted. We all ask her what she's talking about. She says we were calling her name. My roommates looked at me and said, "No fucking way." I immediately said, "I told you this house is haunted." That is a true story. I think the ghost was just a prankster. My alarm clock would get all jacked up. I would be reading books, be halfway done, and then they would just disappear. Number 3. In October of 2017, I lost my husband while I was 7 weeks pregnant. The day he died, I left for work in a hurry. We shared some text after he woke up about a phone interview he had later in the day and about him having some pain in his leg. And then a quick phone call a couple hours later to tell me he was running to the pharmacy for pain meds. I attempted several calls about an hour later to make sure he made it home safe, but there was no answer, which wasn't like him. I tried calling him for hours until finally a woman answered his phone, stating she was with the sheriff's department and asked me to come home. At the time, I worked in a prison, and out of fear that he had got into some sort of trouble, I left my post to go to my car and sped the whole 30 minutes drive back to town. Upon turning to our parking garage, I see a large white van that read "Corner." As I walked up to our home, I was greeted by the same lady on the phone, blocking my view into our home, who let me know my husband suffered a heart attack, later confirmed as a pulmonary embolism, explaining the leg pain he mentioned in the morning of his death. Apparently, my husband made it back home and into the house and locked the security door before collapsing from the heart attack. He screamed for help. Our neighbor and her son heard and ran over to help, but they couldn't get into the house due to all the doors and windows being locked. The son later apologized for not breaking a window and stated due to the shock of panic he lost all sense of reason. They were able to talk to him through the door while they called 911, but unfortunately he stopped responding a few moments before help arrived and he was pronounced DOA. A week or so after his service, his best friend's wife offered a cleansing and a card reading by her mom. Although I was skeptical, at the moment I was desperate for any kind of communication with him or closure. He mentioned a lot of interesting things in the reading, but the most prominent for me was that he was currently in a stage after death where the soul relives its whole life. She compared it when people say their life flashes before their eyes. She said it was a place every soul visits after death as a way to reflect on the life they lived and the person they were. She told me his death was so sudden that he hadn't realized he had died yet, and I would need to help him cross over. She said that she felt I was the one that would help him and instructed me to light white candles and a jar of water to guide him to peace. Fast forward a few months later, I moved into my parents' house. I was laying on the couch and started to feel very heavy, as if I had been administered amnesia. It was definitely some type of sleep paralysis that I was feeling. When I would finally open my eyes, I was still laying on the couch in my parents' living room, except my husband was sitting on a chair right in front of me, as clear as real as he was before he died. Before I could speak, he began telling me he was nervous for his phone interview, the one he was supposed to have the day he passed. He told me he was excited and hopeful he'd get the job and wanted help preparing for it. I looked at him with pain and tears, and he began to repeatedly ask me what was wrong. I apologized. Baby, I am so sorry. Do you remember the pain you had in your leg? You have blood clots. One made its way to your heart. You aren't going to make it to the interview, baby. You died. I will never forget the look on his face. It was a long period of confusion that turned into realization. I apologized again, told him I love him, and begged him to respond, but he just sat there with this strange look in his face. I immediately woke up. The chair from my parents' kitchen table now sat right in front of me, empty. I never dreamt of him after that. I pray it's because I gave him the closure he needed to cross over. We have a 5-year-old son now who dreams very specific dreams about his dad. He wakes up talking about things he couldn't possibly know unless it came straight from his dad. Losing my husband was the first real experience with death, but it brought me peace to have my own confirmation that there is something more after life. Trigger warning, suicide. Number 4. So this happened when I was around 7 years old. I'm 17 now, and I only realized how strange it was years after the incident happened. So when I was around 7 years old, I was staying at my aunt's house in California with my mom. I don't remember why we were staying there, considering it was 10 years ago. All I remember was that it was a very sad time for my mom and my aunt. Everything was fine up until we went to sleep. I'd slept at my aunt's before this several times, so it was a space I was at least semi-comfortable with. My mom and I had always slept in the same guest bedroom together, as we were this night, and remember falling asleep pretty early in the evening. That was until I was woken up in the middle of the night, probably around 12-ish, if I had to guess, the feeling that someone was staring at me. I guess my subconscious could somehow feel that someone was there even though I was dead asleep. I opened my eyes to see a woman standing at the foot of the bed. She was wearing some kind of gown and just staring right at me, with a sad expression on her face. She had middle-length hair and bangs, and was just taller than my mother if I had to guess. She was also slightly glowing a light blue tint, like I could see her face perfectly, even in the dark bedroom. At first I thought it might have just been my mom, until I looked over and saw her sound asleep next to me. After that, my memory goes blank, and all I remember is waking up the next morning with this feeling like I knew it wasn't a dream. Fast forward around a week ago. Up until this point, I think about the incident sometimes, but I just chalked it up being my aunt or something. I was having conversation with my mom at dinner when she brought up the topic of ghosts. I decided to tell her about that night and about the woman I saw so many years ago. When I told her it all happened when I was around 7 on that trip to my aunt's house, her face completely changed. She completely went silent for a few minutes before telling me about why we went to my aunt's house that day in the first place. It was because her best friend, we'll call her Natalie for privacy reasons, had attempted to take her own life 3 days earlier. Natalie initially failed and was kept in a hospital near my aunt's house for the next 3 days on life support, until her family had made the ultimate decision to take her off. This is why we went to my aunt's house that night, because my mom wanted to say goodbye to her. That night she died was the same night we stayed at my aunt's, and the same night I saw that woman at the edge of the bed. When my mom told me this, my blood ran completely cold. I asked my mom to show me pictures of Natalie just to be sure. Even now, even to this day, that face was undeniably identical to the woman's. The same bangs, the same eyes, everything was the same. I shiver just thinking about it now. But the main thing I wonder most is, if that really was Natalie coming to me and my mother as a final goodbye, then why was she so sad? She looked as if she was frowning. Her ghost, I mean. the most sad I'd ever seen anyone, with this look of pure sorrow on her face. If you're skeptical of my story, that's fine, take it as you will. I just had to share the story that's left me shaken since I made the realization. Number 5. So, I believe I can see ghosts, but human ghost and animal ghost. I have 2 dogs. One is 2.5 and is a very light caramel color. The other one is around 8 months and is white with dark caramel patches. There have been 3 instances where I have seen a ghost dog. It looks exactly like my younger dog, in terms of face shape, size, etc. But instead of being white with dark caramel patches, it is fully caramel color. The first time I was looking out of the window, saw something in the reflection, turned, and there was a dog walking past me, then disappeared. Second time, I was walking past my dog's bed, and I saw something in it out of the corner of my eye. Both of my dogs were on the couch, so I took a couple steps back and saw the ghost dog. It quickly then disappeared. The third time happened right now. I'm sitting in the chair, and I saw the dog walking the same path it took when I saw it the first time. I'm thinking there might be something with the way it's walking since it carried on walking after disappearing. It would get to the dog bed where I saw it the second time. The other night I had a dream. It was kind of all over the place. But in the dream I had adopted another dog, and lo and behold, it was a ghost dog I've been seeing. Not sure if this means anything, but I'm pretty confused. I told my parents, and my mom said maybe it could be the sibling of my younger dog, but the other dogs from her litter looked the same as her. Has this happened to anyone else? Or does anyone know what this could mean? Number 6. I'm not sure if I'm in the right page of Reddit to be posting this, but any advice is helpful. Thank you. Long story short, for a couple months, I have been waking up in the middle of the night around the same time at 3:30 a.m. And I usually feel like someone is watching me. I try to convince myself it's nothing, but I went out of state for 2 days, and this never happened to me. This only happens when I'm at home. I flew back home, and this started happening again. Last night, I experienced something that just completely traumatized me. I was sleeping next to a loved one and woke up around 3:30 a.m. I forced myself to go back to sleep, and around 3:35 a.m., my loved one had to wake up because I was crying, wanting. But when they woke me up, I was just frozen and couldn't really move for a couple minutes. I was so scared to go back to sleep, I just stayed up as I still felt like there was a presence. The nightmare I had was about my loved one. The one right next to me was possessed in the moment we were in and was just hitting me till I was screaming. Please, any advice is helpful because I am just scared. Number 7. This has to be my most vivid and wildest dream I've ever had. The dream. I was sitting inside a restaurant looking out the window. I could see the bar next door. It was on a corner in a busy downtown location. The name of the bar was called Hawkeye's. The front was very elegant looking and painted onto the side of the building. I told my friend who was with me that we should go to that bar. So we left and continued to go into Hawkeye's. The door was red and the inside was empty. The high top table was right near the door, and we all hung out in the empty bar and played a game. This dream was so vivid that I could remember the details of the building, the name, and the downtown location for weeks. It stuck with me for so long that I had to look into it. So I type in Hawkeyes and find the bar from my dream. It's in the Chicago in a downtown area on a corner. The name is the same and in a similar font on a sign though. The inside was the same. The door is red. Every detail besides the sign was the exact same. Even the surrounding downtown area. How could this be possible if I've never been to Chicago? I've never seen this bar in my whole life. I'm from PA and never traveled anywhere close to there. But I swear that I traveled there in my dream that one night. Maybe someday I will visit and see if it sparks any deja vu. That is the end of our stories for today. I hope y'all have a good weekend. I will see you for our Saturday creepypasta. I love y'all so much. And remember, it's scary out there. Please like and subscribe. Howdy y'all, it's Curious Raven. It is Tuesday. Hope y'all are having a good week so far. Today we have 2 longer stories, a little bit longer than normal, and they are paranormal in nature. So hope y'all enjoy them. Number 1. What do you do when you and the people around you keep hearing an unknown voice whisper your names? To preface, I'd like to begin by saying everyone that has experienced this is perfectly healthy and does not have any mental disabilities, other than a little bit of anxiety from school. Though I am a huge fan of horror movies, I am not trying to make my life sound like it's from a movie or a documentary for that matter. Simply, I am just trying to figure out if anyone else has experienced something like this and can relate. It began November of 2021 as 2 friends and I hung out at my house. I remember the day specifically as November 27th, 2021. It was a Saturday and my mom had work, so the 3 of us were home at the time with my baby sister. I had never experienced anything as bizarre as this before, and so when it happened, it totally caught us off guard. My mom works in a restaurant, so oftentimes she brings food home for my friends and I. She bartends and is always home around 11:30, 12 a.m. So us eating in the dining at that time was not anything out of the ordinary. My mom had gotten home within that time frame, it immediately gave us our meals and went to bed. In my house, our dining room is surrounded by windows, and the curtains just had been drawn because it was so late. That night, it was my mom, my younger sister, my baby sister, and my friends and I at home. Us being in our teens, of course, thought taking funny photos and making TikToks was the best thing while we sat and ate. To this day, I cannot find any photos from that night. However, all of us are certain they exist. It was fun, and until we, all 3 of us, had heard my nickname called. I say we as in it wasn't just me going insane. It was faint but clear that my nickname was being said. Each of us almost feeling the voice say my name in our eyes. My friends and I turned to each other as I had called back and gotten no response. I walked up the stairs where all my other family was in bed, about to go to sleep. I started with my younger sister's room and continually asked if she had called my name. She hadn't and sworn she didn't. First, I thought she was trying to pull a fast one until I was fully convinced she didn't. Deep down, I know she didn't. My next guess was my mother, who was sitting on her phone in bed with AirPods in her ears. She couldn't have heard me if I called back. So, why would she have called me in the first place? I asked, and she said it was not her. Nobody else was in my house. After that night, we went to bed and blew it off. The second occurrence was on a day I cannot remember, but it happened to me. It happened to one of the girls that was with me that night. I was not with her when it happened. She was with another girl who hung out with us that night in November. For privacy purposes, a friend who heard her name called was Marissa, and the other friend was Maya. For background, Maya, Marissa, our other friend named Nala, and I have been in a friend group since 8th grade. We were always with each other. When Marissa heard her name called, and Maya had been walking through the school building, They both described it as the same faint whisper we had heard on November 27th. Again, we blew it off. Maybe someone was just whispering to her in the hallways and we were going crazy. Up until recently, I had completely forgotten about it all. 2 years later, our friend group split and Marissa has gone separate from Nala, Maya, and I. Nala had not been with us that night in November, nor was she with the girls during the day in the school, but she certainly knew about it. She admittedly thought we were all joking until the other day. Monday, November 27th, 2023. Nala had gone to work and was folding clothes with her coworker in the dressing rooms. She described the area around her as empty, as it was late Monday night in Target. She recently started working there and is still getting to know people around her. As she was going about her work, she heard her name whispered and immediately began looking for who had called her. T.S. stated that her and her coworker both looked at each other because they were confused as to who called her when there was not a person in sight. Her relationship with this coworker was fairly new, and it's not at the stage of joking with each other yet, so she is certain it was not him. However, this leads to the question, what or who again? I'm not trying to act like I'm in a horror movie, but I cannot wrap my head around this bizarre occurrence. I'm in search of someone else's opinion or reasoning. I believe in spirits and ghosts, as one's soul is never dead. No, I doubt it's nothing sinister or something to worry about. Fuck, I even doubt it's useful or good. But I just want answers. It's not normal for people just to hear their names whispered. This third occurrence is ironic as it also happened November 27th. I would lastly like to conclude that saying I'm not scared, we are being stopped. That something is out to get us or someone is out to get us. Simply just asking someone to explain this phenomenon. We all believe in the parallel universe, spirits, and ghosts. Though we are horror obsessed, we are not trying to turn our lives into a movie. Thank you for your time, and please feel free to share any personal experiences, as there will probably never be an answer to this. Hello, it's Curious Raven. I actually experienced this once. I was at home alone, and I was in my bedroom, and I heard someone say my name from outside about 3 times. It freaked me out. It was like midnight at night. No one was home with me. And I heard someone say my name like 3 times. And I just figured, okay, well, it's probably a ghost, trying to get my attention. Or a S walker. And that's why you don't answer to them. But that's all I can say is that it sounds like you and your friends might be haunted by one ghost. And on that certain day, it targets one of y'all specifically. Not sure what to tell you to do about it, but that's just my thoughts, and I wanted to share my experience with you. This next story, trigger warning, eating disorder, suicide, and depression. Let's get to the story. Now that it's out of the way, I will build background. So I had a roommate named Adrienne Michaels. You can look her up if you like. We're very close friends and she needed a place to live, so we moved in together. I was pregnant and we celebrated every aspect of my pregnancy together. She made an appointment to freeze her eggs, but she was in her late 20s and didn't believe her eggs would be good by the time she was ready to have a baby. I'm giving these details so you can see what situations we found ourselves in. A few days after my due date, her service cat alerted me I was going to be sick. Sure enough, I was, and went to the doctor just to be safe. For reasons I won't get into on this post, they illegally held me there and coerced me into having an unnecessary C-section, which was my greatest fear. 3 weeks later, I was in a spiral depression and unable to do my task. I usually cooked and cleaned for her. She spiraled into an ED and lost a lot of weight very quickly, and she quit exercising. Another thing I won't talk about in detail in this post may detail later, she had a very bad day, and that's the night she died. So after that, we had to move. The first day looking, we found a 2-bedroom house on the lake for $750 a month. Similar houses were going for $1,400 plus at the time, so we felt extremely blessed. We were the only applicants, and the owner said his wife couldn't handle living in the house, but wouldn't explain why. So we moved in, and within a few days, the place started feeling unsafe. We felt like we were being watched. The place really obviously wasn't under surveillance, but I felt like a spiritual thing. I've always been kind of a sensitive to spirits, exception. It started pretty benign, like feeling like I wasn't alone in the kitchen or the laundry room, and that was fine. We just figured maybe Adrian was stopping by. I would talk to her sometimes and tell her I'd miss her. But then the dreams started. Pretty standard dreams usually. Feeling like my daughter was in danger, feeling like I was falling, seeing shadows in my lucid dreams. But I had a dream about Adrienne. When she was sitting drinking tea after a tearful reunion, she told me that it wasn't safe to be where she was if he had to leave. Something kept lurking in the shadows. She told me not to look for it because it's going to cause me even greater pain. When I woke up, my baby was screaming in her crib, and there were really huge ants all over. She'd been bitten a few times. It was winter, and there were no ants in the house that we knew of. We kept the place really clean. We put out a poison, but we never figured out where they came from, and we never saw them again. They vanished. My chinchillas would bark a lot when they'd normally been quiet. Soon after cleaning, and I found that looked like a bloody handprint in the closet. I took photos, but they were on my old computer, which I can't turn on anymore. The handprint was very clearly that of a child. When we moved in, I put all Adrian's stuff in the spare room and never went in there. Her parents took only her photos and her cat, so we had the rest of her life in this room. I was organizing in the room when I opened the closet and saw an attic bolted shut and painted over. I could see it hadn't been opened since it had been repainted, but in the back corner of the closet was a tiny chair built in. I got spooked immediately by something falling off the table in the other room, so I went out and took care of it, shut the door, and didn't go back in there. That night was the first night I saw something. My husband was in the bedroom changing the baby, and we were talking. The kitchen has a view to the laundry room, and I saw him in there and was talking to him. I went into the bedroom to put something away to find he was actually in the bedroom. I was extremely unsettled by this because I'd never seen anything pretend to be someone I loved. After this experience, I had my very religious mother come through with some church friends and bless the place. It still felt like I was being watched, but I was able to ignore it now. By the time my baby started walking, I spiraled again into depression. I always kept the blinds closed and lived in the dark. Seldom did I even have the TV on, and my husband worked 12-hour shifts 5 days a week to keep up with the bills and things. My mom was over a lot, but quit cleaning, and I can't remember a lot of it. Honestly, I felt immense guilt that my roommate died because I couldn't be better for her, which rationally I know isn't correct, but I was really messed up during this time. It was a deep winter when I felt extreme chill, like all doors were suddenly open at once. My scented candle flickered and almost went out, but I couldn't move. I was holding my sleeping baby, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw something crawling on the floor. It was large like a man, but the proportions were off, and arms were way too long. It was walking towards us, and everything in me was screaming not to look at it. I could see it coming towards me, but the entry door opened, and my husband came home early to surprise me with dinner. I told him about it later, when I could think about it. I saw the figures several times more, but there was nothing we could do. Our lease didn't end a few more months, so we just sucked it up and dealt with the fear. I looked into the history of the house, and one of the people who lived there was a police chief who was jailed for abusing his daughter. It was a trap house at one point, and someone had been killed nearby. There's probably a lot of experiences I had in that house that I've set out from my mind, but this is everything that really stands out to me. The house felt suffocating at times and like I was being pushed out. The landlord had a second house available for only $450 a month, so we moved out. The day we found out about the other rental place. No one stays living there long. Most people have stayed about 4 months before they leave. Since the events of this story, my life has improved incredibly. I haven't had a single bout of depression since living there. I have 3 children who are all very happy and healthy. My oldest sees ghosts and has past life memories she tells me about. But I'll save that for a future post. I've been meaning to write this for over 6 years now. If you read it all, thank you. I appreciate it getting off my chest. It's been a long journey. That house that you moved into, I feel like really bad things happened in that house and so much negative energy that it was just sleeping in the walls of that house, and that's why you felt depressed. That's why you saw shadow figures, because of the horrible negative energy that was inside the house. I'm glad that you got away from there. That's the end of the stories today. I know it's a little bit short, but I will see y'all on Thursday. And remember, it's scary out there. Please like and subscribe.
I live inside my own world of make-believe. Kids screaming in the cradles, profanities. I see the world through ice covered in ink and bleach. Cross